I'm Lance Grensback. I serve as the chair of the Winchester Select Board. With me this evening are Jacqueline Welsh and Mike Betancourt, our town manager Richard Howard, and David Reed, Selectman. Welcome. This is the regular meeting of the Select Board. Today is Monday, October 1st. A couple notifications of meetings. We will be meeting on Tuesday, October 9th in a joint session with the Planning Board. The key issue we'll be discussing there is the review of the housing production plan. We will then meet Thursday on October 11th to hold the second of our two public information sessions. Both will have been focusing on the Eversource's 115 kilovolt transmission line. It's going to be installed from the Woburn substation down Pond Street, Woodside, Wildwood, Fletcher, Bacon, and Maine. I've memorized that pretty well by now. We held the first one last week. This will be the second. We'd invite all of you who are interested in the 115 line, whether you're neighbors or not, to that meeting. We will follow that up with a public hearing on the issue. The Eversource is asking for a grant of location permit. So we will hold a formal public hearing on that on October 22nd. Between the 11th and the 22nd, we will also be meeting on October 15th in a regular session. Then, as I mentioned, October 22nd for a regular meeting, including that public hearing, and then on October 29th. The meetings in November will be held just before town meeting in most cases, and we will post those shortly. So those are our immediate meeting notices and hearing notices. So quick comments. I've been asked to remind those of you who remember back to our town meeting action on plastic bags. The town meeting bylaw that was passed requires that large retailers, those who have more than 4,500 square foot retail spaces, stop using the very takeout plastic bags, thin ones, as of November 1st of this year. Smaller retailers, those who are under 4,500 square foot total in their area, which covers most of our smaller merchants, have until May of next year to use up their inventory if they have used the small plastic bags at this time. So we will be putting some notices up on the town website, but again, the November 1st deadline applies to larger retailers. Smaller retailers must comply in May of next year. So I don't have any other immediate comments, but I'll open the board.
Nothing right now. Thank you.
Jackie, anything?
I just wanted to continue to encourage residents of Winchester. Don't forget about the wonderful businesses that we have in town center, all the fabulous restaurants and wonderful shops and service locations and establishments. And I'm sure those businesses appreciate everyone utilizing and taking the opportunity to shop local and to also use those restaurants and coffee shops. So just wanted to always encourage our residents to do that. We have such a fantastic town center.
I'm good.
Good. Thank you. So we'll move on to the town manager's report. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Lance. You've covered most of the 115 kV line, transmission line information, but just will repeat the next meeting for citizen input is next Thursday night. We thank those residents that did turn out last Thursday evening and provided their concerns and questions and commentary, and also thank the Eversource team that was there. They wrote out the information and received the commentary back, and hopefully many of the things that are of concern will be addressed as the board moves forward on setting a series of conditions for its grant of location. So that process is ongoing.
Mike forgot to mention earlier that WinCAM did record the meeting, so if you don't have anything better on Netflix, I would recommend the WinCAM version.
Yep. Riveting view. And we also continue to process the appeal on the 345 line. That is still in the Supreme Judicial Court for the state, and no activity of any significance by that court yet. And keep the board, obviously, and the public. public update on any developments there. 346 Winchester Street, 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 346 Win National Grid, as the board knows, we've been asked to procure an additional legal opinion to the issuance of a proclamation that the board adopted several meetings ago. We do have counsel that is reviewing that information. I was hopeful that they'd be in a position of rendering some further advice to the board tonight, but Bill August, who I think is highly regarded counsel in this area, unfortunately could not meet tonight's deadline, but will come in for the board's next meeting, to provide some updating and provide his point of view on what it is the board has done to date, in addition to the overall topic of a moratorium and the steps that the board is taking. In the meantime, we have had some requests for individual new permits, all residential in nature. Jay Gill and I have worked on those to confirm the credentials of the construction companies that would be doing the trenching and the digging and the work, and also we're chasing down the qualifications of all personnel that National Grid would propose is overseeing the actual hookups. We anticipate that those profiles and the backgrounds of the personnel would be satisfactory from a safety point of view, so that we can allow these residential locations to make sure they get heat installed for the wintertime. And I'm sure that that was the board's intention, that we proceed that way in caution, making sure that safety first was the consideration for the installation of any new activities. But we're hoping that Bill, together with Wade, if the board determines that they want both council here that night, will come forward and render you some new advice and insights into what's been adopted. It's that. No other general topics. The warrant continues to be prepared. As the board knows, you held an independent meeting last week on the overall document. It looks to be in very good shape. There's another meeting planned for this week where the relevant parties, town clerk, moderator will review what's been compiled so far and make sure that we have it in a deliverable condition to the residents of the town, and then ultimately to the town meeting members. So all that continues to be processed, and it's on schedule to be a document that we can send out soon.
Just a follow-up to an item that we discussed last week, the Chesterford Road fence accessing the cemetery there. I think that we had observed it to be in an unsafe condition and had kind of planned to at least address the removal of the fence and then notify the neighbors and bring them in for a conversation about whether or not to replace it and what the cost of that would be for the town as well. So I think that kind of tackling that in two steps is where we should go, getting rid of the unsafe condition that exists there now, and then bring the neighbors in to discuss what they feel would be a good outcome for them.
So
I've given you a piece of information that Jay obtained for me, the estimation to replace the gating and the fencing that's there now, so you have that when it comes time to make any decisions along these lines. And then all I can recall from last week's meeting was that I thought we were going to leave it as is, but if, again, the board's concerned, until you invited the neighbors in and got the feedback on whether it should be permanently open, permanently closed, but we can.
Or permanently removed.
Permanently open, permanently closed. Open being removed without the necessity of replacement that's there.
Right.
But if the board's desire is to take out what is currently there, Patty and I talked today about the list. Patty has the list of all abutting neighbors, so so we know who to mail to. I was going to put together a little letter to say that the board was going to take up the topic on the 15th, and that anybody who had an interest would be invited to attend. So that's going to be compiled and on its way. But in the meantime, Mr. Gill's right here. If the board's preference is that a rickety condition of the fencing that is there, it might be safe to take it up, and we can certainly do that.
I think it's more of an attractive nuisance at this point, so I'm just concerned with the liability. So if we remove it and, we're only waiting a couple weeks between when the neighbors are coming in and when there's a conversation decision on replacement, so.
It sounds like there's no scenario where the current condition would be desired to be maintained because it's in disrepair.
Yeah, having had it called to our attention, we
Yeah.
know that it's something we should,
Is it
if we're
possible-
going to keep it closed, we should
Yeah,
replace it.
if I remember the photographs correctly, is it possible to leave the sort of posts and just take out the
The gate,
gate?
The fencing, there was some
Yeah.
rather ragged fencing in the gate, but to be pretty
So,
precarious. Maybe
Mike, what's
maybe
the-
Mr. Gill could,
what's the timing? So I'm thinking the letter goes out and then we
This
can
week.
remove the falling apart part.
Whatever the board determines.
Yeah, I'd rather have the letter go out first, at least they know we're looking into the matters. Because if we remove it before they get the letter, they might, you never know how people
So the letter
react.
will notify them of the removal and the hearing
Yeah.
date on the 15th?
Yeah,
I
just
think
say,
that's
we're
fair.
removing it, but could be a safety issue, just, we'll bring you in and love to hear from you.
yeah, okay. So we'll send them a letter and notify for a discussion
First.
item on the 15th, and that the fact that we'll ask the DPW director to remove the most hazardous pieces, I guess, if that's feasible. I don't know that we need to tear down the whole thing at this point, but I think.
I don't know if there's anything that's usable
Yeah.
for a new, I think Jay has kind of spec'd a whole new fencing and gate system that probably requires new poles. Jay, I mean, you.
Yeah, that's correct. I think if we're gonna let residents walk in, or people from the public walk in there, I don't think we want to take down the whole fence, because then vehicles could get in there. I think we need to make it a walk-in venue going in.
Like
Maybe
narrow it?
5 foot, we could put, some type of barricade, small fencing, but I would not open the whole thing.
Just take down if the gate is the one that's caved in and not,
Yeah, it's probably a 12-foot gate.
just get rid of the gate. Yeah, that's what I would,
I mean, it's pretty hard to get through. I mean, I don't know if these are, right? I mean, it's
truck.
pretty covered over. You think a truck could get there? I mean, if you're,
I mean,
really?
when I looked at the
you
photo,
got a
I
telephone
thought
pole or something you can just put down, or?
No telephone poles anymore.
but ultimately you can put like a post in the middle or something.
Yeah, if we're gonna open it, we'll come up with some plan to let people walk.
It
We
definitely
don't wanna open the
seemed-
whole back end.
Yeah, it definitely seemed wide enough for a vehicle, I thought, when I looked at the photo. I mean, in fact, just the gate that's all bent up seemed
It
wide.
just looks like it's very overgrown there. I mean, unless you're an Ewok or
If
something.
we're going to-
Will Waze bring you through there, or?
Yeah, maybe. Let me suggest that if we're going to
Yeah.
discuss this on the 15th, which is a pretty short term, we just, unless there's something that's absolutely dangerous to pedestrians or something, we leave it until the 15th and then tear it down as a result of the discussion on the 15th.
I think it's 100% dangerous to anybody that
Yeah,
attempts to. I mean, it's just,
A couple weeks, yeah, that's a while.
yeah.
Well, if you want, if there's any pieces that you consider dangerous, let's take them down.
Yes, correct.
But I wouldn't take down any more than necessary at this time until we decide what we're going to replace them with. Just, if there's something somebody would stumble or trip over and catch themselves on,
We're
rusty
gonna have to
cyclone
do some
fencing.
walkway, you just
Yeah.
can't open it up without making a path. You're gonna look at maybe any handicap accessible now?
No, I wouldn't, we're talking just about taking pieces down for the moment.
Temporary.
Anything you could injure yourself on easily walking through the area. Otherwise, wait until the 15th, because we're splitting hairs here.
Use your best judgment to get rid of
Okay.
any.
Okay, so what's the consensus of the board at this point?
Yeah, let's just get rid of it. I mean, it's just,
Well,
and have
if
it.
we tear it down, when we tear it down, take it all apart, now we have people drive through there, so we take down pieces of it that are dangerous
Remove
and
the
we.
dangerous pieces, just what Mr. Gill
Okay,
said.
just the dangerous, if there's anything that's dangerous and you could skewer yourself on it, let's take it down. The
I'll
rest
send
of
a
it,
letter now.
rest of it we can deal with it
Letter
after.
Letter first,
And the director that uses discretion as to
Right.
what you can.
Okay.
You have the sense of the board.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
and don't cut yourself on it.
Yeah.
Okay, matters from the audience. Anybody want to speak on anything that's not otherwise on the agenda tonight? Okay. We have no report from the comptroller. There are no licenses or hearings to be dealt with. So we'll move to G1. We were hoping this evening to take up the solar agreements, solar panel agreements. Turned out the school committee posted the meeting for this morning at 11 o'clock, but in getting their information into the town clerk last week, I guess there was a delay on the software system actually stamping it. So they had to re-post for tomorrow afternoon, I believe at 1:45, something like that. So we do not have the materials completed at this point. Assuming the school committee goes through with their meeting tomorrow afternoon and approves it, it would be for the DPW and for the Vincent Owen facilities. What I would ask the board is we have two options. One would be to meet sometime later this week if we can find a quorum before the vacation to deal with that, if that's what people would like to do, or we can then try to pick it up on Tuesday the 9th.
Just
Busy
as a-
day out there.
Yeah, just as a point of
I
information.
don't know, the question is, how many people are going to be around later this week or if we defer to the 9th? The other question was if we wanted to have council there at our discussion to answer any questions about the contract language itself. So,
Yeah, I mean, I would like it to be at least a camera and televised session, I think, because it's a big enough of an issue. So, and I'm not sure when Mariano's returning, but
he'll be back Wednesday evening, I believe, or very early Thursday morning. So we could,
I'm not around Friday.
you're not there Friday, or I don't know about our schedule for Thursday, but we have a quorum Thursday, I guess is a good question. Are you in town?
yeah,
And we would have to post the meeting and arrange with WinCAM to do it on
I'm
Thursday.
out of town.
They're in town on Thursday as well.
Thursday night, yeah.
I mean, if we need to, it's that we need to move on this contract with the issue.
I think the question was, the earlier we get in the queue with the state, I guess they have some tranches or tiers, and you get more money if you're in early than if you do later. So they could encourage to do as early as possible. I don't know the difference. I don't think over the Columbus Day weekend we'll see a huge
Right.
difference on
We
it.
can do it
So
Thursday morning.
we do it either Thursday morning or next Tuesday
Yeah.
evening.
I'm not available next, well, wait a minute, no, that's the 9th, right? Yeah, okay, yeah, I'm there, yeah.
We could just do it Tuesday evening, I think.
Okay.
Especially if that would be the only thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask a point of information? I know we've discussed this back and forth, but is the high school no longer part of it? You just
I
mentioned
think
Geo.
they're still working out the details on that, so it is, but
That may
that's
come at a later date.
coming a later date.
Okay, same contract then, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will look to see what we can arrange for Tuesday, would meet either before or after the session with
Right, because we're meeting with the planning board at, do we have a time yet?
I haven't been given one, I
So
assume
maybe
it's either
we should
7 or
meet
7:30.
before, if we want it via WinCam in this room,
Yeah, okay,
because otherwise, right? Because the planning board, that's their regular meeting, so
correct.
they would be here.
So I will find if it's, I'll post for 6 if they're starting at 7, or
Okay.
6:30 if they're starting at 7:30.
Yeah, I guess maybe we should, to defer to the chair and other members of the board, but if we met at 6 on Tuesday and had our business, and we had the joint meeting at like 7:30 or 8, then that might give us sufficient time to clear our docket.
Yeah, and we have a couple other issues on,
Yeah,
yeah, because one of the, we want potentially an executive session.
correct.
Okay, so I would, take your suggestion, very close for 6.
Is that, if it's okay
That
with
works
everybody
for
else?
us.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, the material is in the packet that you received over the
I mean,
weekend.
if you want,
so-
yeah, if you want, I can even meet at 5:30 on Tuesday, depending on how much time you think we need. If it's
Okay.
executive session and our regular meeting, because after the joint meeting, we may not have
Could be
space to have
conflict.
WinCam for the balance of our meeting, so
Okay.
5:30, if that gives us more time, that's
Sure,
okay.
yeah, okay. So, yeah, but in your packet are all the copies of contracts for both DPW and with Vincent Owen. And if you have any questions, let us know, and so we can relay them today to council. And I'm sure there's some Anything else you think on that?
On that, I think a critical thing to consider is that the contract as drafted is being recommended by legal counsel that I know there are good legal thinkers and commentators and stuff like this. If you're going to push back, then it probably sends us into a new round of on the draft that's in the packet here. If you're going to push back on that, then probably sends us into a new round of negotiating, which could take a few weeks.
I think it's been
Just so you know, that's all.
pretty well vetted by both the school.
Well, again,
and,
board's
council.
deference on how much everybody wants to adopt and take as a whole, or whether you think there are terms in there that concern you. So, that's it.
Okay. Stormwater management, Beth, if you're available. Just a general introduction to this. We have over the last several years been reminded by Beth that there's federal and state regulations dealing with stormwater, the quality of stormwater runoff. Has been coming creeping toward us, and the MS4 permits require us to pay attention to the quality of that stormwater. I think that time has arrived, and we started a discussion with Beth and Jay and folks about how best to manage those.
Grab this.
How best to manage those expenses. We do not have to make a decision on this tonight. We've had a bunch of discussions. What I asked Beth to do is basically set us up an overview of what we've been doing and sort of outline for us a couple of the issues that we've been debating at the staff level, smaller group, and to think about that in the next weeks and months as we go forward. So this is a preparatory effort.
For the note,
Good?
the board does have scheduled for the 15th, your consultant on water and sewer rates to come in and make you a presentation on what should be considered for adoption going forward as of town meeting.
Right.
You've got an article.
Right, I noticed that.
So this is
You're getting a presentation
Okay, great.
on one of the, as soon as you hear what you hear and you narrow down some of these options, which you think you will.
The assumption is that we are dealing with water and sewer rates this fall, and we will probably be dealing with stormwater utility discussion in the spring. So we don't have to make a decision tonight on the stormwater, but on the 15th, we will probably have to make a decision on the water and sewer rates. This is a think piece.
So I've pretty much lost my voice, so I'm doing my best.
Well, Jay volunteered to do the presentation.
She says I talk too much.
So just a matter of history here in front of you guys back in March of this year. And we worked leading up to that, and then also over the summer with Weston Sampson and the Abrahams group.
I can do it. Sorry, Beth, I just thought for the audience.
So we've done a 10-year analysis of the known and projected water, sewer, and stormwater projects. We had one round of estimates back in March, and we updated it with the Abrahams group over the summer to reflect the new capital request. We've also learned in the past few months that we will be receiving new MWRA money through their grant loan program, so they are releasing 3 phases of money. You have to complete one phase before you're eligible for the next phase. We expect that to take us a few years. Thirdly, we looked at an evaluation of various stormwater utility options. And finally, the Abrahams group has looked at an analysis on the impact of the water and sewer rates. So the goals for tonight's meeting are really first to review the options for financing the water, sewer, and stormwater costs. We have 3 options, which I'll go over. And then finally, if we do choose to go forward with a stormwater fee of some type, to discuss how we would assess the residential fees. So the Abrahams group did an analysis over the past couple of months, and they pulled out our stormwater costs and our water and sewer costs, and also looked at the revenues. So the analysis they did was from FY19 through FY28. The expected annual expenditures on stormwater is between $1.5 and $2 million. and the expected annual expenditures on water and sewer is between $9.4 and $10.8 million. So what we expect on the stormwater side, assuming we have no stormwater fee, we have a deficit of between $1 million and $1.3 million. On the water and sewer side, where we have the water and sewer rates to support us, we have a surplus of just over $940,000 in FY19, and then eventually, if there's no change to the water and sewer rates, we do go into a deficit over that 10-year horizon. So the first option we looked at and for the board to consider is basically the status quo. So right now, the town pays for our water, sewer, and stormwater projects out of the existing water and sewer enterprise fund. So those water and sewer rates are adjusted to cover the cost of all of those projects in those three categories. So moving forward, we can consider just continuing to do what we do, which is to adjust the water and sewer rates to meet those needs as we go forward, and not to implement a separate stormwater fee. Option 2 would be to implement a stormwater fee and adjust the water and sewer rates, keep it all under the existing enterprise structure. So in this case, the water, sewer, stormwater projects would still be all lumped together in the enterprise fund. We would do some sort of balancing act where we assessed a fee that was what we thought would be reasonable, and then we made up the difference with an adjustment in the water and sewer rates. So again, we would be maintaining the existing structure of this enterprise fund, which is adding this fee as another revenue source in that enterprise. And this is similar to the analysis that we presented in March. That was kind of the analysis that we've done with Weston Sampson and the Abraham's group. So option 3 is a new one that we've looked at over the past couple months. And in this case, excuse me, we would create a new stormwater fee, and we would actually divide out the water and sewer costs and the stormwater costs and make 2 different buckets. It would still be under the existing enterprise fund. We've talked to Stacy, and she would be able to do that, just separate it out within the existing enterprise. But in this case, we would implement a new stormwater fee that would pay only for the stormwater expenses, and we would use the water and sewer rates to pay only for the water and sewer expenses. So it would be 2 different buckets of money with 2 different revenue sources. So the next section to discuss is how, if we do go forward with the stormwater fee, how we assess the residential, fees. So typically, stormwater fees are assessed either as a flat rate or as a function of impervious area. Thank you. What other communities have done and what is typical across the country is to do an analysis based on what's called an equivalent residential unit, or an ERU. It's the average amount of impervious area on a single family residential unit. So this spring we had Weston and Sampson evaluate and develop the ERU in Winchester, which is approximately 4,000 square feet, based on, they evaluated 383 single-family parcels out of the approximately 5,600 single-family parcels. So it's really just a sample of those properties. The analysis is done on that. So what you see here is the table that we presented in March, where we had looked at 7 different options. You can see here that in each of these options, we assume that we would have a flat fee for the residential parcels, and that we would do some sort of tiered structure based on the ERU for the non-residential parcels. So the feedback we got from the board in the spring was that you would also like us to evaluate how we could look at a tiered structure for those residential parcels. So what we've done over the past few months is look at different ways to do that. Unfortunately, it's not a simple or easy process to go through. So the options we looked at are, number 1, creating a tiered structure based on our impervious area. That would basically mean that for every residential property in Winchester, we'd have to go through and do a GIS analysis of how much impervious area is on that property. We got an estimate of Weston Sampson to do that. It was very expensive.
How much, Ben?
It was $24,000 for them to do that analysis. And then the issue is that moving forward, we don't have a a way to update that impervious area information. We've done our flyovers typically on a 10-year cycle, so there'd be a big gap between when you do that analysis. So the board asked us, or several members of the board asked us to look at building footprint as an analogy for that impervious area, that building footprint data we could get from the assessor's department. So we looked, again, it's not an exact one-for-one comparison, because obviously you could have a small building footprint and a huge driveway that would kind of skew your impervious area. But we could look at doing some sort of tiered structure based on how large a building footprint is, as opposed to how large your impervious area is. So not going into too much detail now for now, but again, these are sort of the decision points for the board to think about over the coming weeks and months. Number one, to figure out how you want to pay for those increased water, sewer, and stormwater costs, those 3 options we talked about. And if you do go forward with either option 2 or 3, then to think about how we want to assess those residential stormwater fees, either through a flat rate or a tiered option. That's kind of the beginning overview for tonight.
First of all, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was very clear and obviously a lot of work. And thank you for presenting it, even though you kind of lost your voice. And you did a fantastic job. So thank you both for you guys being here as well. We really appreciate all your time and effort. So I just have a few questions about this. So my first one is going to be an easy one for you guys. And I'm sorry to sound completely stupid. But what, maybe this will be helpful for anyone watching on TV as well, but how are costs associated with stormwater runoff? Is it that we're charged for that through, like, downstream through the sewer, or how is that?
No, so there's no fee, there's no cost that the town pays. It's not like a water or sewer where we pay them to gray or get rid of our stormwater. It just goes into the storm drain system. It's not combined with the sewer in Winchester. It's a separate system. And it's discharged to our rivers and streams and wetlands. So there is a couple of things associated. Number one, there's drainage improvements. So the wildland drainage project is something that can be paid for, or will be paid for currently through the enterprise. And then there's this new MS4 permit that's been issued by the EPA that we're required to meet various permit requirements over the next 10 years. We estimate a cost of about $200,000 a year to implement that permit in a town.
And is that directly associated with stormwater runoff?
So it is. It's not the permit requirements are intended to improve the quality of stormwater runoff. So it's not that we're paying based on the quantity of stormwater runoff we generate. It's the permit requirements are effective whether you have a huge amount of runoff or a small amount of runoff.
And is that some sort of filtration system, or?
So a lot of it is our planning level efforts aimed at trying to reduce stormwater runoff and infiltrate more water. So there's a planning element to it.
Okay, and that's
There's also a large water quality component where we have to go and test the system to make sure we don't have any illicit connections of sewer connections into our storm drain system, so that's a big part of it.
Okay, and that's an EPA permit?
It's an EPA, yeah.
Okay, and so those permit fees would go to the feds, not to
So it's not a fee.
Okay.
There's
We just have
requirements, like we have to, every year, complete a series of tasks.
Okay, I see. Okay, so it's sort of like
It's not a
infrastructure kind of.
cost.
Okay, when you said permit, I was wondering if that was a permit fee.
No.
Okay, thank you so much. That's a great information. I really appreciate that. So, so a couple things. So, just generally speaking, just as a sort of a residential homeowner here in Winchester, a lot of people might sort of feel that they like to see the bill because it sort of indicates like usage, and so there's a lot of transparency there, and because it's broken up with sewer and water usage, especially in the summer, if some people sprinkle their lawn, they can kind of like see those things, or if they have like a bunch of extended family who stay for a few months, then they can kind of see their, where their water bill increases and stuff like that, and sort of take ownership of it, and I think that that's a good thing. So, Option 3, I know you indicated would be more work, but it would also provide that kind of transparency, I think, to Winchester, people who will be paying that bill. And so that they'll be able to really kind of like see, well, okay, well, I'm doing certain things about these two, water and sewer, and then this is the stormwater, so I can see that. And I think that's helpful, and I think it's respectful, and I think the effort that the town makes to divide up water and sewer in particular is really impressive, and it's appreciated, and option 3 would sort of perpetuate that, which I think could be a positive. So if I understand correctly, and from being on the planning board for several years, we talked a lot about impervious area, and sort of like the increased research and thinking about that and the importance of it. And is it fair to assume that if you have the more pervious area you have, like say grass, as opposed to like, driveway or where your house actually sits, that in theory helps absorb water runoff? Is that kind of part of the assumption? That
For
seems.
the most part, I mean, it depends also on the types of soil and if you have ledge
Right,
on your site. But
right,
for the
okay.
most part, yes.
In fact, you've taught me a lot when I was on the planning board, so I'm looking at like my teacher here. So I feel like, and of course, as you know, we include now with the different reviews, the percentage of impervious area now, and so that's kind of new in the last year and a half. So, and I think that's also sort of just makes people sort of mindful about all these things about, what's going on the property and some things that they're sort of interested in, what impact that has, and for the overall environment, et cetera. So with respect to option 3, I get the fee thing, I get the idea of the tiered, although I guess I'm sort of, again, I think people appreciate that transparency in the quarterly statement. And if the pervious area, like in theory, if it goes to building footprint, then that's not taking into consideration pervious area that might be on the site that you recognize as well. So, but it sounds like there'd be a cost to figure all that out. So, I think it's definitely, does that mean, no? It's definitely worth kind of like looking into. Do we have to figure this out for this town meeting as far as like whether or not we want option 3 and whether or not we
No, so
want
I
it
think
tiered?
As Richard said, I think the plan right now is to just do some adjustment to the water and sewer rates. Assuming it's all going to be together for the next year or so. And
Yeah.
then springtime meeting, you would look at whether
Yeah.
you wanted to implement a separate fee.
Right, because like, some town meeting members, for example, might see this presentation and say, wow, yippee, this means that we can now lower our water rates because there's $1 million surplus essentially. So, and I think that's a fair, assessment, but it sounds like there's other, costs that are important and infrastructure that go along with that, as you've just presented with respect to stormwater. But I do think it's good to have sort of a transparency and a separate categorization, because I also think it probably helps people think about ways to conserve. And it's just good for consumer education. So I'll be quiet now. But I do, have certainly a lot of thoughts about this. And I just really wanted to thank you for that great presentation.
So I have a few questions. When you talk about this is for the, looking at the stormwater, based on impervious surface for single families, I picked up on that. So what about duplex, commercial?
Right, so the way, again, this is all something that the board would have to look at the specifics on. So typically, the way other communities have done it is that they do it based on this ERU.
So the flat rates I see.
So flat rate for this was our original analysis back in
Right.
March. Right, so we had worked out, we had assumed there'd be a flat rate for the residential parcels.
Yeah.
And that we would vary or create some sort of tier structure for the non-residential. So in this case, non-residential and residential parcels that were greater than 4 units.
Gotcha.
So that's what we assumed back in March. Obviously, this is all up for discussion by the board as to how you want to administer it.
We could do flat rates for both residential and commercial, or
Sure.
we could do tiered rates for both, or we could do one
Yep.
tier for one, flat for the other. So
You could
we
do
don't
2
do
different
those
tiers
things.
for the, yeah. I mean,
One
there's
of the
lots
concerns I think I might have, again, I haven't looked into this, but is there a potential that it might be more, I don't want to say discriminatory, or put more of a burden on, say, the smaller parcels, like precinct 8, you get 6,500 square foot lots, the houses are bigger, over the past 10 to 20 years versus, lots that are 20,000 square feet, maybe a similar size house.
If you do it either by assuming, impervious area or the building footprint, it shouldn't have any, the size of your lot doesn't have any impact.
I'd have to be curious how that
I mean, I guess if
plays
you have
out.
a bigger lot, maybe you'd have more impervious area, but.
Or more pervious area, depending on the bigger lot.
Right, that's
You
that's
could
my
easily
point.
have a significantly more pervious area.
But I think obviously if you go with a tiered structure, there'll always be some people paying less who have smaller footprints or smaller impervious area, and
Yeah.
other people paying more who have more impervious area or bigger footprints. That's just it's a decision for the board as to whether you want to, tier it towards the people with the, if you want to have a flat fee so everybody pays the same. It's kind of.
I'm just seeing it as trickier to, on that, looking at them as individual parcels. And is that part of what you were talking about, the $24,000? What was that
So,
for?
like I said, we looked at the two options to do a tiered residential fee structure.
Yeah.
The first option was to look at it based on impervious area. So
Right.
we got an estimate from Weston Sampson to do that. That basically means that for every single parcel in Winchester, they're going through and calculating how much impervious area there is. So driveways, walkways, garages, building.
Big pool and tennis court.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bocce court.
So it's a physical exercise in a GIS software where you
Right.
calculate that area. So it's a labor-intensive exercise. That was the 24,000.
New monitors that like things change.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that it's, for either one, really. We have flyover data that we did in 2012,
Right.
and we typically do new flyers every 10 years. So we don't have any way to monitor, like if somebody was to widen their driveway or something, we don't have any way to pick
Get
that
rid of
up.
a pool or
There's no-
add
you don't- you
an
don't-
addition to the house.
I mean, additions maybe because there'd be a building permit, but driveways, patios, that type of thing where you don't have to get a building permit for it, we have no way to track it.
I think just to clarify, the reason we asked, so one way to do it is to look exactly at the size of the footprint, the driveways, everything. That looked very expensive, so we asked Beth and Brian to look at the second option, which is to use just the building footprint area as a proxy for impervious surface. So, small house without small impervious, bigger house, bigger. You're missing the driveways, but it wasn't clear we needed to spend the money to get the driveways. Now, I think Weston and Sampson also, from their data, you could also say, small house has 100 square feet, I can add another percentage to cover driveways on average. Big house, you could use a multiplier to sort of guesstimate it, but the amount of money we're talking about here, it seemed to be using the building footprint, which Beth and Brian analyzed would be the sort of effective way to start. 10 years from now, 20 years from now, LiDAR, radar system, something could go in and analyze every square foot of concrete, but this was, there's two options, either to do a real detailed analysis or to use the building footprint and the assessor's data as a proxy for the.
Right, but on that
There's still
one,
quite a bit of work involved with that
Yeah.
option as well. It's not like it's,
Yeah.
there's still a lot of analysis that has to be done, so that.
because is the assumption with option 3, or to have a tiered structure, that the more pervious base you have on a lot, the less you're contributing to the stormwater? Is that the assumption?
I think it's the reverse, right?
No, the more pervious you have, which is grass, that absorbs the water, right? So that's the less, so you're decreasing your amount of, that you're adding to stormwater. You can say it either way. Or the more impervious area that you have, more driveways, things like that, larger patio or whatever, the more, in theory, you're contributing to stormwater. Right, so is the point of the tiered idea to kind of recognize the contribution to stormwater? Is that the point?
Yeah, so certainly that's, if you have more runoff off your site, you have more impervious area, and you're paying a slightly higher fee than others.
But is
Right.
it, getting back just one clarify, maybe I'm wrong, but so if you had a 40 by 40 footprint of a house on a 6,500 square foot lot, that's 25% of the lot. and if that 40 by 40 foundation was on a 20,000 square foot lot, it's 8%. So I don't know how that gets applied. Does that matter?
It doesn't matter.
Does not matter.
Whether you have a 20,000 square foot lot or a
65,000.
100,000 square foot lot, you pay the same amount if you have the same building footprint under that second.
Right, which makes it not really an accurate way to, if the purpose is to try to replicate some proportion of the amount that dwelling is contributing to stormwater. Because if there's more, it also incentivizes people, to the extent we want that, to consider pervious options, because then, in theory, then you're not contributing as much to stormwater runoff.
But the person on the small lot has limited capabilities.
Right, so
do
there
that.
could be two variables. It could be on a smaller lot that it's something even could go to assessor or valuation as well. So you could do this in two ways, but it seems like, at least we talked about this to some extent on the planning board, that sometimes there's different options for pervious or not, and many towns, I'm not an expert here, but many towns actually, from what I understand, require like somebody to have a pervious driveway if they have too much impervious. I'm not saying we go there, I'm just saying there's lots of examples in other towns where if you're trying to have people just sort of consider the impact of stormwater runoff. I'm not advocating any of these, I'm simply looking at this theoretically.
So I think we just
So-
have to keep in mind, if we do implement a tiered structure, we're not talking like hundreds of dollars of difference between the low tier and the top tier. We're
That's a good
talking
point.
like 25 to
Right.
50, so.
Right.
But the assumption is that if you have a small house, you're basically saying that stormwater that lands on the roof of the house is basically running off down the downspouts into the drain system, and that's what shows up affecting the quality of the stormwater and the volume of stormwater. If you have a small house on a really big lot, everything that falls on the the pervious surface of the rest of the lot stays there.
Right.
What you're really interested in is what falls on the hard roof and gets flushed down. If you have a
Right.
small house, small amount, have a really big house, more goes regardless of the size of the lot. So this is really just looking at the hardscape out there, and it's a proxy. I think the other point that Beth taught us in the earlier discussions is that while most of the costs today are in, studies and planning areas, if we're lucky, it stays that way. And so these costs are pretty marginal. If we're unlucky and they start saying, well, your stormwater runoff is pretty filthy, fertilizer, dogs, whatever, we may in the future be looking at some capital investments to clean this stuff up. Maybe not, that's too early to say. And one of the questions here is, do we set up a system by separating them out and tiering them, whereby you can sort of set the stage for later increases if you need to without having to go back and read. So
But-
these are basically user fees.
Yeah,
On water and sewers, you were saying earlier, we meter those,
right.
and you get assessed on you use a lot, you pay
Right.
a lot, use a little, pay a little. On this one, the question is a flat fee depending on the size, regardless of the size of house, or a fee based on, the size, the amount of impermeable hardscape on your area.
Right, are we trying to actually connect it with the stormwater impact or not? And then the other, two other points is that it seems like we're, some of the kind of thinking on the planning board and engineering is that when people sort of suggest an addition, say, for example, or a new construction, to what extent the lot can absorb all the runoff, or at least a substantial amount, and to have that data as part of whether it's an application or just part of the discussion. So there's definitely a lot of thinking in this area. So it's just, I just have another question though. So the project on the west side, for example, is that, just using that as really actually a hypothetical, is the idea that if we go in this direction and have a stormwater fee, whether it's option 3 or 1 or 2, that projects that are needed around town would be paid for through that funding effort potentially? Is that the whole
So
purpose?
What's the difference between option 2 and 3, right?
Well, I just meant of any of the options. Is the whole idea to have a pool of funds, no pun intended, for stormwater projects?
Right, so again, the option 2, you would create a stormwater fee and you would raise the rates, and that money would all get lumped together into one bucket.
Yeah.
Option 3, you'd have a stormwater fee, you'd have a water and sewer rate, and you would pay for the project separately out of those two buckets. So that's really the key difference between option 2 and 3 for the board to consider.
Right, no, I understand that structurally, yeah.
Your West Side project would, under option 3, be paid for out of the stormwater.
Right, mine's more of a macro question. So is the whole sort of point here, the whole mission is to have a, again, no pun intended, a pool of funds, so to speak, for these projects, as opposed to having to go to either to bond them or go to the general fund, or capital. Is that the idea?
Well, I mean, they could still be bonded.
Right, depending on the size, but I mean that some of them, there would be this other amount of money that,
Well,
is that fair to say?
The amount of
Yeah.
money they're talking about would pay for all the capital upgrades that you're talking about.
Right.
That's exactly
Yeah.
what you're.
Right, okay.
Any question, comment?
No, just want to say thank you. I mean, I think that the tiered option seems to be the most equitable long-term, for, especially in consideration of how Winchester has been developing, over the last 10 years or so, right? So you've got a lot of, 1,500 to, 200 square foot homes turning into 4,000 to 5,000 square foot homes. So, and it has an impact on our stormwater. So, and I'm of the opinion that the GIS work, might be worth it, financially for us. But maintaining that long term, there may have to be some connection with the assessor's office or the building department in order to make that happen. But I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the impervious area is definitely the most accurate and equitable way, because there's certainly people who have small building footprints but have huge other impervious areas on their property. It's just, like
But
you
it's,
said,
but it's
the
not
matter
equitable
of
for,
long-term
right,
being able to maintain that.
Yeah.
assessment.
And I have noticed that a lot of developers are going towards creating pervious driveway space as
Yeah.
well. So it seems to be, a trend. So it's, to Jackie's point, I think it further encourages that behavior, which is something that we want to do.
We also have the choice in setting up tiers. Beth and her staff analyzed using 3 tiers, maybe top quartile, bottom quartile, middle 2, something like that. We also have a choice of what rate we want to set for each one. And we could set a flat rate across all of them to start, or we could set some difference. We've just done some very rough, she's done some very rough calculations with Matt on how that would work. But and you could start with the footprint and move to a much more detailed analysis if we want to. I think the question we began to look at was, it's relatively small money now. But if it were to grow, then you might really want to come back and say it's worth spending $20,000. You make sure that everybody's equitably.
well, the GIS data could be helpful for other things also. Even just how we kind of look at stormwater more holistically as a town. I was just kind of curious that if somebody is proposing new construction on a site, and they can establish through engineering that their pervious area can absorb 100% of the stormwater. So what would happen in a situation like that? That's actually, in theory, kind of what we'd like to see, right, in theory? And so then that person might say, so I shouldn't be part of this sort of tiered fee because I'm actually taking all my
So
stormwater.
this is where it gets tricky, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So the MS4 permit requirements are there regardless of whether you have zero
Understood, yeah.
runoff from your site or 100% runoff from your site. So that's part of the
Right.
equation. And as long as everybody doesn't take that
Bless you.
approach, then, we're okay. But I think the board could certainly look at doing some sort of abatement for people who have, like you said, infiltrated all of their rooftop runoff. Certainly any of the new developments that have been built around town, we've required that of developers. So there's a lot of people in those newer properties who don't, they have an infiltration system that takes their rooftop runoff.
Right.
We also have to look at a base and minimum rate, regardless of the
Sure,
amount of
right.
runoff, because we'll have runoff from streets.
Yeah.
in town.
Yeah, I mean.
That people use,
So
yeah.
there's a general public use.
Public good type thing.
runoff, I'll say,
Right, correct, yeah.
that you'd want to cover, and then everybody who shares them because
Right.
they use the streets.
Right.
So,
Yeah, but the GIS stuff would be kind of interesting, maybe just in coordination with some of the other, like, planning efforts in your department. that relate to other topics, so. But that was a fantastic presentation. You explained it so perfectly.
So, as advertised, we don't have to make a decision tonight. I think this piece of it probably is, from now until Springtown meeting. So, Beth, that was really excellent. Thank you. Catherine did a very
Thank you to
well.
you guys for contributing.
And she's done and the folks have done a lot of additional work that's worth looking at some point. So maybe on a quiet point over the holidays or something, when nobody has anything to do here, we can bring Beth and Matt and take another run at looking at the pros and cons on this. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you so much
And the
again.
reason I'm cutting her short is because we don't want to run her into the ground before we do the traffic.
Plus, she's losing her voice.
If you're still willing to stick that out,
fine.
so.
Okay.
You can save the traffic if you.
Easy go, Jim. Someone's traffic's gonna take a while to get home.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. All right, so the traffic review committee met, that's the internal staff committee, formerly TAC, met in August to review a bunch of traffic issues we had before us. So I think tonight's meeting is just kind of go over those and decide whether the board wants to vote on any of them or move to public hearings for now. So-
And this is regarding the warrant articles?
No, this is this memo from September 5th.
Okay, but there is a warrant article in here about the consultants, yeah. Okay.
What I've asked Beth to do here is just to run through these very quickly to help to confirm. She'll have a recommendation as to how they should be treated by the staff or about public hearing. I wanted sort of two objectives. One is to make sure that the board and the public know that we're addressing these issues, and then two, to get support for Jay and Beth to decide, we have to hold a public hearing before we do something or not.
Yep. Okay, so the first one is a resident had written into the town manager's office concerned that there was no on-street handicap parking. So just to orient everybody, this is Main Street here, this is Skilling's here, and this is Lake Street here. So this is Lane's Funeral Home right here, and this is like where the gluten-free or I'm not sure.
Yeah, the coffee.
Yeah, Bagel Land, whatever it is right now. So it was specifically in this stretch, that block, that the resident was concerned there was no on-street handicap parking.
For like the tailor and stuff?
Yeah, and then the hairdresser. So the TRC looked at it, and there's a couple different locations that we thought of in this area, both on this side of the street and across the street, that might be worthwhile to put in a handicap spot, but we did think there should be a public hearing so the business had the opportunity to come in and comment, because obviously those on-street spaces are very important to their businesses, and one of those spaces could make a difference in terms of how we place it. So
We'll mark that, unless there's discussion, we'll mark that for a public hearing.
I mean, just as an observation, we've talked about maybe putting some attention to the kind of configuration of this road anyway, possible trees or better marking, but I guess that's a different day. Yeah,
This will be a short term.
yeah.
right, yeah.
Paint it before the.
Yeah.
Again, I don't
No, it
think
seems important.
it's a big issue, but I do think the businesses would want to have
Yeah.
their opinions heard as to how we place that.
There's not a lot of parking spaces there.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Especially since the turning lane for this intersection starts, so there's like no parking from here down.
Right, although all the more reason that if you need a handicap spot,
Yeah,
there's
And again,
nowhere.
I don't know, this building in particular has a very large parking lot, so they may have an opportunity to kind of maybe sign some of their spaces in their lot for handicap spaces, so that's something that we could consider as well. Okay, the next one was, we had received a comment letter from a resident on Mayflower Road who is concerned. So this is Johnson Road and Old Village Drive. The Vincent Owen School is up to your left in this picture. And this Old Village Drive is used as an alternate drop-off for children walking to the Vincent Owen School. And she was concerned, there's no sidewalks in Old Village Drive. And she sent some pictures with cars parked on both sides of the street, and a school bus trying to get through. It was very congested. So she recommended that we look at either some parking restrictions and or adding sidewalks in this area. I think obviously the parking is a quicker and easier solution in the short term. So what TRC recommended this area, it's kind of open space area here is all town conservation lands. So what we thought is that we could start some sort of no parking from that boundary with 7 Old Village Drive up to the corner, just on that left side of the road. And then it wouldn't impact the parking in front of that house. So we could do either no parking all the time, or we could do no parking, 7 to 3, school drive, something like that.
Where are those cars gonna go, though?
So I think the cars that are parked there are the people who are parking for the alternate kind of pick up and drop off.
Yeah.
I think that the schools have identified that as an
Yeah.
alternate location,
Right.
so to kind of absorb the traffic into the area,
Right.
so.
So, I mean, they would just, park, probably back up a little bit further on Old Village, but I do think it's very tight in here. You don't want kids walking in the street with the two-way traffic and cars parked on both sides. So I think it was a dangerous area. If we did have no parking on this side, they could at least walk in the grass area. It's vegetated, we can trim back the vegetation to get out to Johnson Road.
So is there a house at this corner?
No, that small lot at the corner.
Yeah.
This small lot and this
All
piece
woods.
are all town conservation lands.
Wow, so this is gonna be a crazy question, but I mean, is it possible that, obviously it would be an expense, but that there could be a sidewalk put in there if it's all town land?
Was it a sidewalk?
obviously not tomorrow,
Would go
but-
in a public way, I would think, not necessarily on the conservation land, but it's something that.
Yeah,
maybe
it's
would
expensive,
have
you'd have to
Yeah.
put it in the capital budget.
It seemed like this was a quick. kind
Seems
of
like something to look at for the
solution.
future, if the school needs this area as designated as another drop-off area, then maybe it's an important safety feature to include a sidewalk on that town land.
The street's so narrow that if they're
Mhm.
parking on both sides, you don't have clear passage between
Right.
them.
So
I mean, I
I
think too,
don't-
some of the neighbors in that area have smaller driveways, so if they do have guests at some point, then
Right.
it's going to be difficult for them to find any sort of parking. You
Right.
you can't park on Johnson Road, and, further up Old Village is not gonna be helpful for you, so.
Right, which is
If
why,
we did, yeah,
if we did like a school hour type
School hour.
restriction,
Because after school hours is not a problem.
Right.
So-
yeah, and it's just the fact that I don't know where those, in the morning now, especially with the bus stop for the middle school being right on that corner
Oh,
now,
is
it
it?
just moved. It was at the corner of Hawthorne, just north of there, and it just moved to the corner of Old Village and Johnson Road.
Oh, okay.
So, that spot in the morning is just kind of crazy.
Yeah, how's the crossing? I know this is a totally different topic, but how's the crossing on Johnson if the McCall bus stop is there? Or is there another one on the other
So
side?
there's a cross down there.
There's
but
Okay.
a crosswalk there.
At
isn't there?
Amberwood and
Yeah.
Johnson.
What I'm sympathetic with Mrs. Boyd's request, because I'm off Winter Street, where we do have some signs on one side that says no parking, but people park, teachers park, but legally on one side, parents dropping off, parking on the other side, and particularly during the winter,
Yeah.
there's no space for anybody to travel, even a car, and it's dangerous because some people rushing to drop their kids off, somebody opens the door and they're gonna take off. So although it'll displace them a little bit, I do feel that the suggestion is warranted.
So I guess the question is whether you want to vote it or you want to hold a public hearing to get input from the neighborhood.
It's against public conservation. I'm applying for us to take an action now. We can always, if it's just limited to school hours, that would be no parking during school hours would be the intent. Is that correct?
Again, we kind of left it open, but I think that's
I think it's a
the
good
time
solution.
when we have the most
Yeah.
impact, so yeah.
Mike, have you been there during the school hours?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I
I mean, since your kids go to VO,
They're gonna
yeah.
be displaced at his driveway.
No, I'm just kind of curious because your
I think
kids
that
go
there's a
there.
lot of bus traffic, there's a lot of car traffic. I think probably one of the biggest issues in that area is that that speedometer that is right in front of Vince Noen is completely useless at this point, and it's really when people come over the hill on Johnson Road that are speeding, and you can't see it all when you come around that corner. So you can't see anybody turning on Old Village, and you can't see anybody crossing. So I think that the biggest improvement would be to move that speed signal, because now it's behind the other
Rapid flashing.
the rapid flashing beacon, so you can't even see it.
Can't see it.
So it's I think that would slow down the traffic, but it's almost impossible at this point to make a left turn on Old Village anyway, just at that.
With the
moment.
cars, yeah.
With the cars. So that's where the biggest backup is now in the morning, since some wise guys put a traffic light at that intersection at Johnson Bridge, so.
Well, so it sounds like maybe moving the speed sign and putting in the no parking along the conservation land might be helpful.
So I know
In
we
the
looked
meantime-
before at the speed sign,
Right.
it's a, the state has a regulatory limit as to where the school zones are, and I think you're kind of at the outer edge. of
Yeah.
Can we get a waiver for that?
Yeah, I mean,
We're gonna
we
look
could
at it.
ask,
And by a waiver, we just have Jay do it.
I don't think- we could certainly ask as part of the Safe Routes to School project.
Yeah.
If they think would be,
I think if they looked at the area and how traffic is now,
topography,
where the
yeah.
bus stops are and everything, I
Yeah.
think that it would make sense. And that is in that corner right there, it's also very high turkey traffic area. So,
And you mean the species, not the,
both.
okay.
Either one motion or two motions, one to sort of look at feasibility of relocating that, the second one might be to put up no parking on the, Dave, go ahead.
Well, yeah, again, just to go back, again, without having a public hearing, I'm just, Mike, you know the area, do you think you're gonna have, if you do the no parking, don't you think you have the potential of a bunch of these folks on Old Village coming in and saying, you didn't talk to us about it? Because if you eliminate the parking on one side, everybody's just gonna keep going down
Yeah, I
the,
just don't know
down
where
the
you would
street.
park if you're coming from, I mean, the idea is that, that artery of Johnson Road going into Vincent Owen is just crazy backed up, so what we want to encourage people to do is to park on Old Village and then walk to, so.
Like they do on Amber.
Right, so, yeah, right, so right in front of my house, I mean, it's just a parking lot every morning, so.
Are they parking coming in, parking on the right side, on the left side of the road, where we get it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so are they parking on the right side of the road too?
No, I don't think so, it seems like it's more parking on the,
And how about enforcement? Who's gonna enforce that no parking? Are we gonna be, again, people can be a little lazy sometimes. You think they may
Are they
just
parking- are they
park
parking on
there?
both sides?
they are parking on both sides, yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the concern we had from the resident, that it was a dangerous situation, and the kids were walking in the road because the way the cars, there's no sidewalks, the cars pull off so far that they can't walk.
What was the resident suggesting? I think you said that.
Either no parking restrictions or the sidewalk, but
Okay.
obviously the sidewalk is a longer term fix, and we thought the no parking just in this stretch here
We can do it here, or we
would
don't.
kind of be a short term.
what do we think the cost would be for a sidewalk along there?
To do it.
I'd have to look at
I
it.
mean, you'd have to decide how far you want it to go up, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, what's this intersecting street, like what?
Yeah,
what
I wouldn't go
flower
past
there?
the house, but
Yeah, I don't know, so,
we'd have to look at
Is there any chance the residents would want it to be no parking on the other side, and so cars would actually park on the town side? I mean,
again, that's why you would hold a hearing to get that input.
I mean, because those residents might say, why don't we have,
We're solving the
yeah,
problem. Let me suggest, we can't solve it quickly,
Yeah.
we gotta go do a public hearing on it.
Sure.
See if we
Yeah.
look at all three issues. Left side, right side, sidewalk,
Yeah.
long term,
And this, we should loop the schools in on this as well.
I know, that's what I was wondering too, the VNO, yeah, to invite them anyway, to see if they,
Okay. So let's put that one down for hearing. We're making our way through the list quickly.
Yeah, we're cruising.
Okay.
I mean, do you think it's like a serious emergency right now that we should do something temporary? Because we have done temporary
I think
before.
if it was, if the safety officer was so concerned, he would just do
We would
something on
address
his
it.
own. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've done it in the past, temporary. Okay, the next one, we had a letter from a resident of Stevens Street, so this is Mount Vernon Street out here, Washington Street, saying that there were a couple trucks that had gone through her neighborhood that had damaged property. One was a flatbed truck that was delivering sod, and another was a school bus. Excuse me. So she had requested no trucking signs on Bridge Street, Kendall Street, and Stevens Street. So Bridge Street comes up from Washington, Stevens Street, and Kendall. So TRC did review this, and we're obviously sympathetic to her to the damage that was received, I think in those instances, the two that she gave examples of, I don't think the no truck signs would have stopped it if somebody was getting a sod delivery. I don't think, you know, that the truck certainly would still go through even if there was a no truck sign. So I think we felt it wasn't worth it. I don't think these streets that truck traffic is cutting through. Typically, they're very small and narrow. I don't think they're really cutting through here to kind of avoid the major streets. So we didn't recommend it at this time. Okay. The next one was a request by the safety officer. So there's an existing traffic signal. This is Forest Street and Washington Street. There's an existing traffic signal here. He was requesting that we make all 4 approaches no turn on red. There's a crossing guard here in the morning, and obviously they, you know, use the pedestrian signals, but people can still go right on red here. So that was his request.
Sounds good.
We did this at church in Bacon,
He did.
after the state.
Yeah, I think it helped a lot.
Yeah, it said it's dangerous, but couldn't wait 3 years until they did the signal, so we finally said, we'll put no turn on red and see how that works.
And then we got the signal and kept them because it seemed like it was helpful, right?
Yeah, and the no turn on red.
It's definitely a safer condition for people who are crossing.
So the staff recommendation is to put them at all
It is,
4
yes.
based on the sergeant's recommendation.
Yep.
So would you like authorization to do that tonight?
I mean, the other thing that's nice about that is that some of them are so wide,
Yeah.
you know, that like a pedestrian can't even get across like within the amount of time.
Right.
People from
Yeah.
Washington on
So that seems like a good idea.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think we need a public hearing for this, or if the board's agreeable, we can just vote it tonight.
But the question is, would you like a motion tonight to authorize you to install?
That would be
Would you
great.
like one right now?
I would love
That'd
it.
be great.
Would you like that?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I move that no turn-on red signs be placed at each corner at the intersection of Washington Street and Forest Street. So there'd be 4 signs all total. Is that right, 4?
Second.
Okay, moved in second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. The next one, I didn't do a slide for, so there was a letter from a resident of Wildwood Street concerned about the speed of vehicles on Wildwood Street between Woodside Road and Cambridge Street. I can say this is a concern that TRC and the new TTAC committee is well aware of and something we've discussed. I think as part of the work that TTAC is doing, they will probably prioritize kind of corridors through town that they'd like to have studied, and if we are able to get some funding for traffic studies, this may be one of the places that they would take a look at. And there's probably some things we can do in that corridor. In the meantime,
Yeah,
Jay
we're gonna-
is striping it for 10-foot lanes in that area.
That'll narrow the travel lane.
So it'll
Oh,
narrow
okay.
it and hopefully slow things down a little bit.
And will that allow a little more room for bikes or something too, coincidentally, or?
Possibility,
Okay.
yes. Yep.
Yeah,
Um,
and at that location, there's all those kids going to Lynch
Right.
from the flats, yeah, okay.
So Sergeant Batchel said he would have the radar trailer out there from time to time.
So we don't need to take action on this.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything at this point for us to do, you know, any concrete. Okay, the next one, we are back to the Kendall Street neighborhood. So we received a letter from the residents here of Kendall Street, request, saying that they had seen a dramatic increase in their cut-through traffic from Mount Vernon Street, which is out here on the bottom, and Washington Street. And they were requesting resident-only do not enter signage. So we put the traffic counters out. I just took them in, so I don't have any data to discuss. But I will say that at the last TTAC meeting, there was a discussion about do not enters and resident-only signs, and I believe the TTAC is going to be putting a general policy statement recommendation together for the board to consider on those.
Because we'd have to look at Elm, Kendall.
Yeah, so Elm Street already has a do not enter on, at Mount Vernon. Elm Street has do not enter, but you're right, I mean, it,
The whole.
The chain reaction, they're all,
Yeah,
yeah.
when was the do not enter on Elm
Long time.
Long time ago.
Okay, yeah.
How's that do not enter residents only working up on, we did that up in
North Border
South
Road.
Border Road?
Myrtle.
Yeah.
Yeah, Myrtle,
It's working
yeah.
great.
And we got signs up there, discourage everybody, I don't know whether they obey it or not, but we can chat something. It's the potholes that discourage me from cutting through.
Yeah, so I don't have any specific recommendations at this point on that one.
Okay, so this is a big study.
Yeah, and again, I think the policy statement that's coming forward from the TTAC is something the board should consider as well. Okay, the next one is, since we put in the signal at Johnson and Ridge, we've been seeing a few unintended consequences with people cutting through. Specifically, trying to go down Cox Road to High Street Extension.
Wow, I didn't even know those connected.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, it's not actually, because High Street Extension is a one-way.
One-way.
So from the T, the letter T at the end there, to Ridge Street, it's a one-way coming in. And after that, it becomes two ways.
Oh, that's tricky.
So you can't actually cut through. I mean, you can
People
do
are.
it,
Yeah.
but you're not supposed to. There's
Yeah,
a do not
people do
enter
it.
sign right
Maybe
here.
people used
that
to do it to a
T.
lesser extent
Yeah.
before the lights
Right.
there. And,
Yeah.
you know.
So again, a resident of Cox Road had asked for a do not enter resident only sign on Ridge Street at High Street Extension.
So wait, would people try to avoid the light and go this way into town center kind of thing? Is that,
I don't know if they're going to town
It's just to
center, but
avoid
they're
the
just
light.
trying to avoid the light.
okay,
Yeah.
huh.
So we did put signs, not a throughway
Right.
at the intersection of Johnson,
In Johnson,
Cox.
right.
Yeah.
Because initially,
Avoid that.
when the light was first live, I mean, the traffic was backed all the way up past.
Yeah, all the way to the left.
So I think it's kind of resolved itself a little bit, but.
Yeah,
Oh, the
we
signal
changed the
timing.
signal timing a little bit,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think people have just found another route to go also.
Yeah.
So again, we put the traffic counters out here on this part of High Street Extension just to see how much traffic we were actually seeing do that. And I don't have the results for,
So that light really interferes with the freeway that existed there on Johnson
Yes.
Road?
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, that's again, you'll have data, that's
I will.
a study,
Yep.
okay.
yep. Okay, so the next one is, we had a request from a resident of Sunset Road. This is Washington Street, this is Forest Street, so that's the intersection we were just looking at a minute ago. This is Sunset Road. Up to the top here is the hospital, 620 Washington Street property. And this is along the river here, to the north of the river is where the new bike path goes. So he was requesting that we put a crosswalk on Sunset Road at Washington
Oh,
Street so they
nice.
could access. And I completely understand their desire and concerns for that. We looked at it and we just didn't feel like it was a safe place to cross. It's not so obvious here, but when you're driving, the sight lines aren't very good from this intersection going north, and people are accelerating from the light. And there are no sidewalks currently on the Sunset Road. So, and also, one of the major concerns brought up by the safety officer is that they have a crossing guard at Forest and Washington, so they want all the kids to come down to that intersection and go through as opposed to crossing down here at Sunset Road. So for right now, we didn't recommend a crosswalk in that location. You know, long-term, if we thought we had funding to put in a flashing beacon or something there where we thought we could make a safer crossing, that would be something we could look at, but I think for right now, we just didn't feel like it was that safe of a condition.
Can
to
I just ask a
install.
question about the bike path? So does it, and I probably should know this, but does it cross the road or
It
just sort of?
doesn't, no,
it just, like, kind
it
of starts there.
It stays on the hospital side.
Right,
all the way
okay,
up Into
okay.
Woburn. Yep. So again, I completely understand what he's saying, that there's a lot of residents here at Sunset Road who, that's a much easier way for them to get over. It's just a matter of whether we can make it a safe crossing for people.
How about maybe upstream at some point, like maybe in
Yeah.
connection with the hospital
Yeah, I mean, that
entrance or
would be-
something?
Right, at the Washington Street part of there. And the other thing we've talked about with the project going on Craft Foods is that they may the original bike path was to go up that other side and go into the Crawford's property, so maybe as part of that development,
Yeah.
they might be able to extend the bike path, and then it would make sense to.
Tunnel under Washington Street.
That'd be good.
Give different
I mean,
source to do it.
Yeah, that would be nice, though, then they could just go under the underpass.
That'd be great.
Be wet, though.
So again, was,
So no action, we.
yeah, at this point, we did recommend against it. And then the last one was, this is something that we had gotten at the end of 2017, and we just did the traffic counts earlier this year, so we had a concern, so just to orient everybody, this is Church Street, Bacon Street, this is the new traffic signal that the state redid there, and the request was from Central Street, so Central Street goes up from Bacon Street and actually connects onto Church Street here. And there was a resident who was concerned about the speed and volume of traffic in that neighborhood. So looking at our traffic counts, the speeds were, generally around the 30 mile, but 80 percentile speed generally on the 30 mile per hour range. There's definitely, a little bit of total. So the column in the middle here is traffic headed towards Bacon Street. So traffic towards Bacon Street. So coming from this way.
Oh, to avoid the light.
Yep, so people coming from Church Street, probably cutting through this way, and then the other was going from Bacon Street up to Church. So definitely, in the mornings, there's more people coming from Church towards Bacon. In the afternoon, there's more people coming from Bacon towards Church.
To avoid the light.
To avoid the light. So, again, we have to be careful about putting these resident-only signs everywhere because, it pushes traffic to the next street over. But as a first step, we said we would look at whether there's anything we could do to retime that signal and make it a little bit better. I think Bacon Street definitely gets backed up in
It
the
does.
evening.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the board wants to do anything more than that this time, or you want to just kind of.
I think your suggestion of looking at the traffic signal would be the quickest and
Yeah.
easiest, if that can be the first step.
Yeah.
Is there there's a right turn arrow, right? Or
On
no?
Bacon Street, there's a left turn
Left turn.
arrow.
Okay, oh, and because there's still those no turn on red signs
There's
now.
no turn on red, yep.
So, Beth, if I've cut my notes correctly on North Main Street handicap parking spots, want to schedule a hearing sometime next month for that.
Yep.
Likewise, on the Old Village Drive, sort out issues, and that you're authorized to put up the no turn on red.
Yep.
And the rest of them are either under study or to be, so we can find a solution to them.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you for all your hard work on, these are such important topics for residents.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jake.
Okay, Beth, do you have anything more?
No.
You're welcome to stay.
Very good. You're welcome to stay for the next party, but same issues, but thank you very much. If give Beth some.
Swan Street Bridge, Jay,
some
Beth.
lozenges,
On the
No, I
agenda.
understand, yeah.
Beth, thank you very much. Very nice and concise description. Very effective.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, the next article of business is more traffic. Jim, would you like to come forward and talk about the traffic review committees? Well, I'm sorry, the
Capital planning.
planning, where did we have the, I'm sorry, you're under warrant articles. I'm last. You're last, I'm sorry, you go out for the warrant articles. So,
Thank you.
Helen, Jim, if you and others would like to,
Hey, Jim.
Hello, everybody.
How's it going? Hey, Brian. Nice seeing you.
Good to see you as well.
Okay.
Hey, Steve.
Helen, are you going to join us?
Hey, yeah.
Where's Helen?
I'm just slow. Catch
How's it going?
up with us.
Take your time.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We're back again.
Good.
Guess what we're asking?
Money, great.
Okay.
There are no problems, very few problems we did not solve.
Can't
by
solve
having
it all,
it.
right.
You sure about that? All you need is money, right?
Yes, yes,
That's true.
we've noticed that.
Most of us have. Okay. We are here tonight to
Maybe
go
just tell them
through,
for the audience at home, they certainly know these famous people, but perhaps you want to let the four of you introduce yourselves.
Brian Vernalia, Helen Filio, Jimmy Johnson.
Sam Allison, finance man.
Okay, and you three are volunteers on the capital planning
Yes.
committee. Thank you.
As you all well know, flood mitigation has been a priority for the select board for 20 years. There were 14 projects, there are 12 done, and there are 2 to go. The one that we are coming forth again is the one regarding the Swan Street Bridge and Culvert. Capital planning is notorious for being conservative. We don't like to incur more debt because we've already gone that route. So we have not gone forward with this until recently, and the committee feels quite strongly that we need to think about how to fund this and do it, because it's not gonna go away, and what happens is the price goes up. Every time we delay, the price goes up considerably. So, the proposal that was put forth last Monday, was it, Jimmy, you came?
I believe so.
Okay, was not only to fund the project, but how to address the debt issue, which is a big thing. We know now that the money from Winning Farm has come in, and so we're asking for some of that, because I know there's a big long list of people waiting for that, but that's one
That's
thing.
for all of it, so.
Okay, we could do that.
Yeah, everyone else on the list has already asked for all of it. so-
Okay,
Twice.
okay.
So Jim's correct, yes,
Okay.
okay.
So we would like to put a award in for that kind of money. Earlier, I have some information for you that I brought. We got the letter from Jake San Antonio, and we got the schedule. I think I should have one for all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I made 10 copies, so you
I
can
think we have copies in the packet.
Yeah, I do too.
Yes, Mark, he said no, bring it.
Thank you for bringing them.
The cost is $2.8 million, that's the one we're looking at. If we had $500,000 for the Winning Farm Conservancy, that would help. That leaves $215,000 per year. Correct. Usually we get from free cash to capital $220,000 that we use accordingly. The suggestion has been made that we take that money that's coming and use that against the debt service. If it doesn't use all of it, which probably it will, we could use more of it for capital. But at this point, if we take that, that's a known source of paying off debt service. As I said, if we don't move ahead, every year there are more projects that come on here. You've seen, I'm sure, the list of projects that are put forth before these projects. There's millions and millions of dollars of projects. Some of these really cannot wait much longer, like the Waterfield Bridge is coming up, that has to be done. We have to fund money for that. We've got a year grace on that one, but that definitely has to go. Near and dear to my heart is the Lockman and Ridge Street traffic control, because you take your life in your hand and go up there. I mean, people zip across Ridge Street like there's no tomorrow. And if you're going to Wright Farm, it's awful, it's really bad. But we have the West Side Fire Station, that's $8 million. We have the bridge and Main Street Bridge. So delaying is only going to cost you more money. And that's kind of why we came. We are almost finished with our report. It's just putting finishing touches on it. We're almost done with the recommendation for the fall town meeting and the spring town meeting. So I hope next time we come, I will be able to give you that report and we'll be able to see where we are. But we asked you one more time to consider helping us fund this.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question? Thank you guys so much for being here. This is obviously an important project, and this is going to sound a little bit crazy, but we just had this fantastic presentation about the potential stormwater rates, but then there was a notation about a surplus. So is that already committed? Because that's actually, related to water.
It'll be somewhat expended for some of the capital programs that are suggested in the water and sewer activity, but there'll still be a healthy balance.
Were you guys here during that presentation?
I'm sorry?
Were you guys here during that presentation? I'm not talking about a potential new fee, I'm talking about the current, what was, unless I misunderstood it,
The
surplus.
retained earnings.
Right,
I
it said
don't believe- I
947,000?
don't believe that money, if it's in the water and sewer account, actually can be used for, it can be used for flood drainage project.
For not
Which we
stormwater?
did do last fall down at Meadowcraft, down by
Okay.
Wildwood area. That was over $3 million, and it affected like several houses. That's what that money is, can only be used, or cannot be used for flood mitigation, can be used for drainage. We're
Okay.
taking them out of two different wells, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that's what we're doing.
Another pond.
Yeah,
Wells?
well, the dams, I mean, you know. So I do
Okay.
not believe that that money can be used for that funding source. But there's a lot of drainage problems, we'll use it, just.
Yeah, I know, it's sort of, no, no, I understand, it's sort of interesting though, because if you have a stormwater problem, then it becomes a drainage problem, so, but,
Drainage.
Crazy
and
me.
Drainage
Yeah.
and flood mitigation are two different projects and are viewed in two different scopes. Basically, in the MEPA decision and the way we've handled them in the town in the past. Like I said, all drainage is paid through the water and sewer enterprise fund. All flood mitigations are paid general revenue or the capital stabilization funds. This
Okay.
time, we're gonna combine both of them and make it work.
yeah, it's an idea.
Thank you for coming in. I think that this project has been in the queue for a long time, and we've had visibility to the whole flood mitigation plan for 20 years. So I think this is a necessary safety issue and will allow us to get a little bit closer to the goal line. And my concern is that the cost of this project has doubled, since we've been considering it. So it's not going in the right direction for us. And so I know taking on any further debt service at this point is concern for the town. I think that we've taken on quite a bit in recent years with school projects and other flood mitigation projects. But this one, I think, we had identified originally when we were considering the linkage payment for Winning Farm. This is actually the project that we identified part of that for, some of it for affordable housing and some of it for the Swanton Street Culvert project. So while there were many people that were trying to get their hands on that money, I think that this was really what we had identified as a priority, a safety priority for the town. So I think applying that to this project is a good idea. And we also just received notice that from the DOR that our receipts are $2 million or so higher. So, and that's been reported. So obviously, the economy is strong and things are going well. We also received a unanticipated increase in excise taxes of around $400,000. Is that right, Richard?
Yep.
So there's a little bit more money coming in this year, and it doesn't mean that we should go out and just spend it and have a party. But I think that reducing the overall cost and the overall debt service by applying, I would make a recommendation of $800,000. From that DOR unanticipated receipt level coming in, and the $500K from Winning Farm. We will in a few years be underneath $100,000 of debt service for the project, even if the money that the capital planning committee is included in its budget every year, that $200,000 or so is removed. So we are going into a very tough budget cycle, and we will be looking at an override. So it's not the best time to be taking on debt and spending money, but I think that for this project, that there's we can't afford to wait any longer, and it is a safety issue. So, and I think that the further we kick it down the road, the harder is it going to be to get our arms around it. So.
Similar thoughts, maybe just a little tweaking on the pots of funds, but I think everybody everybody realizes that this project is going to occur. It's not a matter of if, it's when, and it seems like it just keeps going up and up and up, and if we know it's going to happen, let's try to get it done. But, I'd be more inclined to look at the winning farm dollars and, motion to put 800 of that into this project. I think you were talking about 800 from the DOR, additional.
I think with the issue with that payment is we did identify a good portion of that for affordable housing. When, the Winning Farm project was originally going to be elderly housing there, we were going to get significant credit towards our subsidized housing inventory for 80 or so units. We were going to get credit for all of that. So now with the project that we have, it's fine, but we're only going to get 2 units, credit there for affordability. So I think that part of the trade-off with that increased linkage payment was to be applied for affordable housing. So I think that the two loudest voices on the claims for that money were probably Capital and probably the Housing Partnership Board. So I didn't mean to cut you off, Dave.
I'm going to offer
Sure.
get the ball rolling. Yeah. So let me offer a third funding option that we've been discussing in the possibility of this. And this is, I guess, the ground for this is one, I would firmly agree that, this project needs to be done. It's critical, and it's going to have an impact on the costs, both the flood risk as well as the flood insurance costs upstream. If the project were able to go ahead, if we could fund it and have it go ahead next summer, because we want to have it done as quickly as possible, that would be good. But I understand from Jake's memo that by the time they plow their way through the waterway permits and everything like that, probably we'd be lucky to start it in kind of mid-late summer, which means we'd be into the school year and be a mess. So that skewed our thinking a little bit. The other option is to think about funding it through stabilization funds. And the reason for this is, after, I don't know how many years of warning, Richard does this regularly at town meeting, but saying, we're running out of our operating budget. It's been 10 years since we've done an operating and stabilization override. Actually, just operating, I think. Last stabilization was, correct me, Helen, 2002.
2002. Everyone's always complaining about the capital funds running out.
Yeah, basically, we've done pretty well for 10 years, but inflation and the fact that we have, the last 10 years, only 500 or 600 kids in school and people moving in and services expanded. We're right at the edge of needing more money for the operating budget. What we're discussing now is going to the voters in March, which is a proposition 2.5. Puts us on a diet, have to go back to the voters. I do that in March, and to ask for both an operating override and additional monies into the capital building stabilization, which is where you properly use this sort of thing like that. I guess the only concern about funding this now is that if we go ahead and for any reason we fund this stuff and we don't get the override passed, or it's delayed a year, we're suddenly basically spent out all the money in our checkbook and in our bank account. And we would, in that case, be scrambling for your 220 that we get and for the Winning Farm monies and everything. We'd be scrambling to make sure that we got our teachers, our firemen, and our policemen paid without layoffs. Presumably, the worst case would be we'd patch together enough money for the next year, and then we'd bring it back, and you'd have another override go with the following year, and that would go. If you can assure me that we're 100% certain that we're going to get the override vote come this March.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. Right.
What do you want me to sign?
Jimmy's going to vote twice for it, I know. But if we could do that, I'd say yes. Let's look at the schemes that, either the scheme you have or the scheme that Mike has produced, to fund it now. But given the fact we can't build it so quickly, and given the fact we don't want to bet 100% on the override, I'd be really reluctant to sort of strip everything down, fund it now, and leave us with very little in the bank in case it doesn't. On the other hand, I think the consensus that we've talked about, and Sam can address this, is we need to put more money into the stabilization funds for all the projects, things like that. And some combination of Winning Farm monies and stabilization fund monies would be the proper way to do it. I think that's what we probably tell the voters, is that's where it's gonna go. You got to, you don't get it done for immediately, but you do make sure that if you don't get the override in March, you're not laying off teachers, firemen, so things for this project. So that's a third option, and I expect there may be something better in between all those.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've got, there's another alternative. I think that what I want to do is identify those funds from Winning Farm and from the additional receipts that we have, identify them for this project set aside. We can approve the borrowing. We don't have to do it just yet, and I think that's, and we can wait to see what the outcome of the override is.
We do that. I mean, we can think about strategies now.
There's a scheduling problem too, I believe, because.
But again, the core issue is, if we're 100% sure we're gonna get the override, no problem. If we're less than 100% sure, you're gonna be scavenging all those monies to keep the town afloat on the teachers and fire and budget salaries. So that's the.
We've always been
I
so
don't mind going through and saying, if the override goes through, here's how much we could allocate and how we do it. But then we'd have the option of using stabilization instead of just the others.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, I think it's just that.
Jim, I'm sorry, Jim and then Sam.
We've been going around this for a very long time.
It's
Just
just
finding excuses for every reason. This is funds, I'm not talking Winning Farm, I'm talking general fund revenue, free cash to fund the project. This committee has worked diligently and the boards have worked diligently to address flood mitigation. Now is the time. We can stall, we can procrastinate, we can do everything we want, but what we should do is the flood project now. Reason we should do it now is for several reasons, and I'm going for hours. I've already stated some, but some new ones are, if you want to do some real long-term planning, you got to look out in the future for the Morocco School, specifically the school buildings. One of the things I'm looking at is this is an evolutionary step. We're at step number 11 now. Our last one is step number 12, whichever the project numbers are. But if you really want a good quality school, and you really want to improve the public safety and the health of the residents around there, keep this in mind. You do the flood mitigation project, technically take 121 houses out of the floodplain. That's just for Swanton Street. Then we have to move up and we have to plan for the railroad culvert. If we do the railroad culvert, therefore we can apply to FEMA to remap the floodplain, take all these houses out. First of all, there's a public safety issue, public health, once you get them out. You don't want to go in someone's house and watch stuff floating in the basement. I've done it several times. It's not pleasant. You see people, it's awful. But that's the first thing, which we're sort of forgetting because it hasn't happened for a long time. The second thing is, if you really want a good school, you want the people that are in charge of building the school, which is the EFPBC, to be able to plan without restrictions. Now, if I look at the school now, Morocco, I know I can't build in a floodplain unless I build it up on stilts, and it's very expensive, and it's probably not economically feasible. If I'm able to get that area released to the floodplain, or even some of it, not all of it, some of it, it expands my horizon to allow the architects and the EFPBC to build the best school for that site. If you restrict the floodplain, you're going to build a lesser school, and you're probably going to infringe upon the neighbors along Irving Street because you're going to have to build it out towards the parking lot. But this is a 5-year project at least. We got to get going, Lance. We can say we can wait a year. We can say we can wait 6 months. It doesn't matter. It does matter. Time to do it is now. The funds have been asked for. We've made suggestions to the board. We've come up with a very innovative, actually Roger came up with a very innovative way to address this plan and get it done now. We're not talking about 10 or 12% escalation per year. We're talking about doing it now. We're talking about, if we're lucky, and if we get the plan, we can probably get ready to go in June to build it. Now, we were hoping to go a little before June, we were hoping to go, but right now, the plan for the schedule is like June 1st through the end of September for construction and completion. This will get something done in this town that's crucial to not just the entire town, but specifically the neighbors in that area. If you go back to last spring's town meeting, we had a very interesting discussion on water, which is the drainage project. You know, we had the opportunity to do something. The town meeting took the information, collaboratively and collectively supported that and voted because they knew it was the right thing to do. Yes, that's going to affect your taxes, but they knew it was the right thing to do. Bring this to the town meeting and let the town meeting decide if this is really the right thing to do, specifically not for 7 or 8 or 10 neighbors, but for at least 123. There's a little residual effect upstream, but we won't get into that. This is the time is now. And we can wait till April, we can wait till next year. But everybody, the stars are almost aligned to open the floodgates. And let's open it so we can get the water out of town a little bit faster.
I would agree with you on all the good reasons to do the project. The issue is simply timing. If you commit all these monies now and you don't pass an override, you're going to be laying off the staff that would go into those schools. So, and you got a letter from the, so.
The question is, what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well,
I mean, you know, it's one of those things, Lance, and you and I disagreed, and we worked out, but we've worked out things like this before in the past. I think we can do it now.
It's just a matter of money. If we have to, if we fund this, and we don't have money come next year to pay teachers and firemen, is that a higher impact on the town than waiting a year?
I guess the question goes back to last year, when we spent $3 million for a drainage issue. If we don't spend that $3 million, we could have saved it for something else. So, I mean, we can play circles and we go around and around all day long and just get everybody aggravated. The thing to do is to get something done.
So a couple of comments. First, the $3 million came out of water and sewer.
Came out of
Very
water.
different.
No, it's 110. It's gonna go on your tax rate as a 110.
Still a tax.
So
True.
it's going to increase your tax rate technically with a, if you want to call it, it's more money. You could call it a technical override, but based upon that, you are increasing the whole town's water and sewer rate to cover a $3 million expense. And you can
Yes.
call it whatever you want
You're
to
not
call it.
taking it out of free cash.
You're not taking it out of free cash. You're not taking, but you are taking it out of the taxpayer's pocket.
Yes.
Free cash is an ideal thing to use specifically for one-time expenses. Free cash should never, or available cash, should never be used to fund the operating budget because there is no reoccurring free cash, generally.
And so that's the point that I
So-
need to raise, which is we used $2.3 million of free cash last year to balance our budget because we are out of alignment on our revenues and expenses. We also are forecasting that we will fully deplete our reserves by the end of fiscal year 2021, which is only 2.5 years away. And I also want to remind everybody that the $220,000 the capital currently gets each year is required to be voted by town meeting. So if we use that to fund 20 years of debt, you're basically removing that town meeting authority for 20 years. And to Lance's point, if we don't see an operating override in the spring, then you're now impacting the operating budget by another $220,000, which is what Lance is getting at, that you then have to cut somewhere else to cover that debt cost, which means realistically teachers, since that's our largest expense, or public safety or DPW, because those are your biggest buckets.
The debt service is not,
It's a matter of timing and money. So
but the debt service is not $200,000 on this project, so, you know,
It's
it's,
not
you
the
know.
question of the debt service or the
Yeah,
cost. I
yeah.
completely agree with Jimmy's
Yeah.
point that we need to do the project and we could pay for it. The issue is just timing. If we suck down all of our checking account and bank accounts this year and we don't get an override early next year, you're into layoffs. Okay? If the override goes
But we're into
through-
layoffs anyway.
No, we're not.
No.
No, we're not.
No.
No, we get an override passed,
No, I understand, but I'm just saying it's, whether or not, this isn't the project that's going to push us to
Well, this
layoffs.
is the project that sucks down the reserve monies that we have to pay in case we don't have an override.
Actually, in the first year, it's only 67, it's less than $70,000.
I'll let-
In the end year, it's, in the beginning of we'll say the second year, the funded year,
Yeah.
which is probably 2020, I think it's $215,000, and it slowly decreases.
The issue is not the money, the issue is the risk, right? If you suck it down now, and the override doesn't pass, you're at risk of laying off a lot of your workforce, okay? If you hold off for a year and you get the override, you can fund it through stabilization, or we can devote any number of other resources to it. I don't think it's an issue of how important the project is. I think it's just an issue of, if you guarantee me we're gonna get the override at 100%, I'll fund it tomorrow morning.
Okay, no problem. Let's go.
Okay, so, Richard, you comment?
As
You
far-
have a comment?
Yeah, I think Brian had a comment before
As far
that.
as the timing is concerned, we keep on talking about how we can push it off, well, I'm not saying we want to, but we can push it off. This is going to result in Swanton Street being closed for 3 to 4 months. If we push it off, we could potentially find ourselves at the same time that Cross Street might be closed for an Eversource project.
Yeah.
So that we're gonna win, we're gonna.
So what I'm saying is that we're talking about the timing, and the timing is now logistically.
Well, I got, your
Logistically.
VHB engineer says it's unlikely that they're gonna get the permits to allow a start in June, which means, as far as I understand, they're gonna, August maybe?
I actually figured July 1st. It says, by June.
But that means you're in the school year anyway. so-
No, I'm talking about the same time that Cross Street might be
Right.
closed.
We
at
could
future.
go ahead with the
Eversource.
we go
Yes.
ahead with the permitting, and if the override passes, it goes right ahead, right? Isn't
The
that?
other thing is gonna delay the Morocco construction, because this one has to come
We
first.
don't have the money for that. right?
But, well, we don't have the money, but let me just step on something there. I thought the state school board favorably looked on shovel-ready projects. If you don't technically have a shovel-ready project in the best location, it could therefore be passed over, and therefore we could be losing some state funding to do the Morocco. I mean, these are all ifs, ands, and buts. But if you follow the EFPBC, we're very lucky to get 2 buildings at one time, now we can't get any. What happens when the cycle says you're ready?
But realistically, the MSBA is looking at Lynch prior to Morocco.
But
So
what
we've got a lot
happens
of
when you're
time
ready?
before
What
Morocco.
happens when
And
they gotta be
I'll
ready?
defer to Brian, but what we're rumors hearing, they're gonna come out and look at both Lynch and Morocco, and our suspicion is they may say, we're not gonna pay for 2 separate small schools once you build one larger school, which could be, well, in Lynch.
Can't say what they'll say.
Yes, who knows what they're gonna say, but that I fear is several years down the road.
I guess what I was trying to say is that the timing, there's the finances, and then there's the timing. The timing would be best if we move forward now.
Okay,
If we push it off a year, we might be pushing it off 3 years.
Okay, so the question is, can you set this thing up so that if the override passes, and we have money out of the stabilization funds or others, that we can move ahead in June?
That's a good question.
Why don't we just identify the money now for this project and let town meeting have it and approve it, and we can hold off until we have on the actual borrowing. We can approve the borrowing and wait until town,
Making it contingent on the override and the stabilization funds?
we can just, we can wait and see what happens. And,
Well, the permitting,
yeah.
is it good for 2 years? Because a lot of permits are good for 2
Some of them
years.
are 3, some are 2.
Yeah, so I mean,
3
it
years.
could go forward with the permitting,
We're in the
hoping to
process
get
of
it
the
at
permitting,
June
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to see this project. I think it's a relevant time. I think you should give it to town meeting and let town meeting decide. They're wise, and they've done the best for all the citizens in the town. Give it to town meeting.
They
let
can
them have
do
the
that
option.
spring town meeting too, right? At that point, you'd know whether you have the override or not.
You could do it next 2 years from now, too, Lance. I mean, we're just
If
suggesting,
you did that in the spring.
at the committee, we're just suggesting to do it now.
I think there's just always going to be something, and it's been, anecdotally, it's been the case that something always just jumps in front of this project, and now,
And there's always a trade-off. The question is now, if you're 100% certain you're gonna get an override,
Yeah.
then you can fund it now.
I think it's an interesting proposition to put it in front of town meeting contingent on an override.
Yeah,
That at least
could be
removes
done.
the risk.
and it sets aside, this money that typically we've had a policy in the past where if DOR brings in our receipts higher, that money is supposed to go to capital projects and capital investment and not operating expenses. I mean, that's been the policy over the years.
I'm unaware
So-
of that policy.
I've
Yeah.
never heard that.
Yeah, so,
If you look
Yeah.
at
Mr. Town Manager, is that a policy?
I think that, this would
Good thing
be,
you're here tonight.
I think that it makes sense, right? Because you don't want to you have a one-time funding source and you don't want to create an operating exposure for yourself over a long period of time, right? So if you get $1 million and you spend it on teachers, well, that's going to be an operating expense for you long-term.
I'd rather put it back in free cash.
I understand.
Alleviate the 2.3 million we took
What
out.
would have happened if you
Understand.
came before you tonight and said we need a fire engine? The big one.
We'd wait until next spring to find out. what
You
the
can tell
other
John
money is.
Nash that.
I'm serious.
Seriously.
If you make it contingent, that's fine, okay? But if we strip out our checkbook and bank accounts now, and it doesn't go well in the spring, you're into bigger problems than just deferring this for another year.
So to summarize, what are the pools of, or funds that we're talking about to summarize? We've got the winning.
My option would be 500 from winning, 800 from, ultimately from free cash, and
1.3.
and
Two
and
And the 220
and the 220.
The 220 is,
is the annual.
yeah, but wouldn't that be less if you're,
Services the debt.
it services?
First
the-
year, 67,000.
Right,
You only
but
got-
that's gonna reduce, you don't need the
Our borrowing.
220
Right.
if you're
Probably
going that.
borrow that either. Probably just gonna want,
Which is what I had asked for a couple of weeks ago. I think Mark had put together some numbers. Right, if you put $1 million in, then your debt service is a lot less, because that was one of my concerns.
Yeah, at that table, we've got some numbers, on,
Yeah.
the debt service on that. So, it would be, basically under 100,000 of debt
Right.
service in a few years.
Then you
So,
don't have that 220 from then on, and you are, then what, are you not going to ask for more monies in stabilization?
you actually wouldn't need that 220. You wouldn't
Right,
need
you
that
wouldn't
whole
need,
So,
if you're increasing the down payment, your
you need half of
bond
that.
payments are less, because
Yep.
if you, instead of putting $500,000, you're putting $1 million down.
At some point in the near future, you can also, you can get some retired debt, which,
Well, but that would get it.
that's,
I can't
If
resist
Richard
jumping
doesn't
in
tell
here
you
at the last minute, so I've repeated many, many times.
Solve the
at many
problem.
meetings that I'm not gonna be here, right? I can't resist.
in spirit.
I've tried to be a financial steward in creating our town management budgets, and there's been always that balance that capital planning has worked with in terms of no new debt and living within its means. So I have a recommendation. I don't know that it's the solution, but it's built around this. I do not think you should use any free cash resources at all to fund this project. My advice to all of the committees, if you can all see fit to I won't be there at town meeting, right? But if you,
We may call you back as a consultant.
as we did with McCall, for instance, we had everybody in the room understanding that it was a important project and we had a funding mechanism to put it forward. I would say that the best proposal is to bond the whole project. Propose to bond the whole project. Husband all of your free cash resources to deal with what you have in front of you, which is potentially an override passing, potentially it not passing, and FinCom especially faced with, in the springtime of 19, having to put together a budget that holds the existing services in place for at least another fiscal year. They're gonna need every dollar to be able to do that and still have a reasonable reserve at the end of the day. So I think there's less harm in bonding it all. And saying as part of your override message, this is now part of debt and interest that is gonna be in the budget going forward. Just account for whatever that table is gonna be for 20 years, and I assume it's gonna be something like $250,000, probably of new debt service that'll show up in the budget. And, you know, you figure out going forward whether the 220,000 that capital usually gets can account for it. You know, if you have that kind of flexibility, if that 220 is still there in one of these outlined years, or the retiring debt is still there. But I think if you bond it, you propose bonding it, you roll it into your override analysis, say that's part of what the town needs going forward. If the override passes and you capture everything you need, whether it's in this combination of stabilization fund increase, or whether it's just general override operational increase that takes care of debt and interest, then you haven't lost your place at all. It's accounted for. No skin off of capital's nose. They continue to be able to have stabilization funds moving forward, maybe the 220, maybe even the retiring debt. That's all something that FinCom would have a hand in, you know, in those outlying years. But at least you know you can afford that in constructing an FY20 if you don't have an override done. That's probably something you can afford, certainly in that first year, because as Jim's pointing out, you're paying interest only in the first year going forward. And then those years down the road, when the new $250,000 hits, it just has to be part of the expenditure side of creating a new budget in FY21, 22, and moving forward. But then you have everything that you need.
It actually may help with the override, because a lot of people like, you know, projects.
Right.
Right. And the thing,
Totally agree.
you know, the thing you should, if you do it now, bond for it, and tell VHB to chase down the permits, you do have to find out whether or not you can get the project done in that summer corridor. Because the other thing that you should decide as a policy decision is, if you can't, if you're not gonna get the permit before July, August, are you willing to have the road closed down from September to November? I don't know that you're willing to or want to do that, you know. So you may be, even if you borrowed all the money now, you might not be spending it because you can't get into the, you know, the corridor until calendar year 2020, when you know you can have your permit and fit well within that June to September, early September timeframe. So that's, you know, I think you're chasing, you know, a little bit of a race on getting the permits in time to get it done in 19. But my advice is, don't use any free cash resources. Let the $1 million from Winning Farm go to the free cash analysis at the end of FY19. Somewhere along the line, people will be asking for affordable housing and other initiatives, but you want those resources there to be able to divvy them up, as FinCom would advise and sees fit. But I think just bonding the whole thing is, in announcing that it's the highest
We
capital
could have done that
priority.
5 years ago.
I think that's what you've been
Well-
asking for, essentially. I mean, it's, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, the
So-
committee was adamant about not
Well,
encouraging.
I think
Yeah.
these other solutions and alternatives have come out of that
Yeah,
not
trying to piece it together.
being, you know,
Yeah.
what anybody wanted to do. So I think,
But now I think because you are asking for override funding for everything that you need, you might as well make it part of everything that you need.
And if you won't go for stabilization overrides, you would have some choice as to whether you want to use that money or the 220 to service the bonds.
We are so limited in what we can do.
Well, here's the fiction around the 220.
Yeah.
So
right.
capital is generously offering it up as a way of helping fund the debt service, right, which is fine. So that's their way of saying, look, we can do without that. FinCom, we can do, but that's what you're saying, if it's 220 gonna be
They're saying
devoted,
this is enough of a priority for,
that we can do without the 220 every year. I know you want more, Helen, you know, I need more, I not want it. But that is a way that FinCom, in the end, can put the budget together to say, okay, we're not putting another $220,000 over to the capital stabilization funds this year. We're holding it on the debt service side of the equation, and it'll just not be there as an expenditure. It ends up kind of staying as a revenue source. So that's one way of doing that, but I'm saying just put it all on debt and interest, like we did with McCall, and make it part of the overall expenditure need and
So Richard, to clarify, are you saying bond it now? Well, with town meeting
I
approval?
would bond it, well, you can bond it now, you don't have to draw it down, you know.
Right.
The decision about drawing it down goes into whether or not you can get into the summer timeframe. And so you could hold off, you might never have to actually borrow it.
So you're not saying bonded contingent on override?
No,
You're saying,
well, again, if everybody agrees that it's a project that has to be done, and it's gonna be part of the expenditure side of thing for debt and interest going forward, we've got to do the project, then it's there, and then you're into Lance's, together with everything else, what do you have to cut
right,
in order to pay for what you have to pay for first? You have to pay for debt and interest.
Right.
You don't have any discretion around that. This will be another $250,000 in debt and interest. How you get there, without any override monies is gonna be part of the trick.
The other consideration is this solves that particular bridge problem. Don't tell us it's beating up on me for umpteen years. It doesn't solve the problem of all the other smaller capital projects that are out there, and the fact that the capital building stabilization funds are pretty thin. So, I mean, one strategy is to say, I do need an operating override, and I do need to replenish the capital, and make this project the first horse out of that gate if you replenish the capital building stabilization funds. Because then you have, I mean, the model we had in 2002 and 2008 was basically, you had one question with two pieces, right? Do the operating and do the capital stabilization fund. And if you would go to town meeting and say, if you go to it in the fall or the spring and say, we want the stabilization fund increase because we sort of critically want to fund that out of the thing, get that going. But then that sets up a pattern of leaving some other money in the capital stabilization fund to begin to deal with some of the other projects out there. I mean, I was trying to solve a lot of pieces at once, but that's one strategy to do it.
There were years the capital was not funded before 2002. And we got in such a bind with all the deferred maintenance. It's taken a long time, but now we're getting back in the same thing. Because we can't keep up.
I just fear that if we solve this project, say Swan Street funded outside, funded outside everything, that people are gonna say, well, geez, capital, you spent all your money, we can't give you anything on stabilization funds. And that would be a
Was it
disaster.
on the
We
list?
still have $66 million in
Right.
projects for the next 5 years,
It's
so
a
20
long
million
list.
for next
So
year
I'm
alone.
suggesting, I'm following Richard's pattern is I would suggest making the bridge part of, and add in, the key thing you're gonna fund out of the stabilization funds.
If you do that, is that going to conflict with the Eversource and Cross Street? You can't have two streets closed at once.
We thought about that.
The answer to that.
We're gonna win the
is it
appeal.
depends. You have to find out when you get there, whether or not they're gonna be in the street on the same
When you're
kind of
knocking on
calendar
your
year.
door. What are you
We only have 2 years to choose from, that's 19 and 20.
I think you got some assumptions, and I think the question is, do you think Eversource is gonna happen next summer?
I don't know, I would say
It's
no.
gonna happen in 2 summers.
Best case scenario, 3 summers. But maybe 2
Well,
summers.
best case scenario is
Best
never,
case.
never.
3 summers.
With you,
Well, it'd be not, well, yeah.
That's their case scenario.
If it had to happen.
Right.
It could be pushed out into 2021 by the time they get all their permitting and get everything done,
We've got a project, we'd like to see it done.
but that's,
We'd like to bring
you
it
know,
down.
that's my recommendation is that you bond it all.
And we agree, the capital committee has a plan. We believe it's gonna work. And we're willing to go forward to make it work. So,
And, just by the way, as kind of a commercial for capital, I know that the committee is frustrated with the level of resources and the number of things it can fund and bring, but I think you've had a pretty good track record of, at least as long as I've been here, getting to town meeting and getting those one-time resources in addition to your stabilization fund and declining debt service and $220,000 resources to get projects funded. But the town has done a ton of capital stuff. I know it's off the books, but you just did a $130 million high school.
That was
We
on
just
the-
did a a $12 million restoration of Skilling's Field. You just did a $4 million upgrade of
We forgot about all
of
that.
Mount Vernon Street and Scally Deep.
And then
I mean,
McCall, yeah.
The town should be proud of the fact that it's on an override basis, been willing to, in getting those overrides passed, been willing to invest in some serious capital initiatives, in addition to everything else that the capital committee has been putting forward, buying the fire engines, doing the fire alarm systems in the schools, whatever it takes. Exactly, so, the town has done a lot, it should be, proud of what it's
But capital
invested in.
involves long-term planning.
Right.
And so
True.
because you fix a roof this year, doesn't mean you're not gonna have to fix it in 10
No,
years.
that's true.
That's
You got-
the way it goes.
Yep.
This is why I'm anxious to see us do something with the stabilization funds in addition to just the operating override, because to solve just this bridge, you want to solve that. But you don't want to basically set yourself up for people to say, well, you had your time at the trough, I can't do it. You want to basically put some money in the
Some of the safety
stabilization fund
issues.
so that you can fund the bridge, and there's a whole bunch of other things that we need longer term.
I don't think that they're mutually exclusive. I think that we're talking about, money for the capital stabilization fund and the building stabilization fund, as part of the override. And then we're talking about, bonding this project as well. The problem is we have done a lot of capital projects, but we haven't always done them in the priority that the capital planning committee has recommended. So we've been taking out projects, whether it be, for a turf field, or we've been doing, the light at Johnson Ridge. And I told you last time we were in the meeting, I'm as much to blame for that as anyone else. But we've got a priority, and we have a plan that needs to be addressed immediately. And I think bonding it now, I think, is a good option for that.
As long as you can pay for it, and guarantee me that come end of March, and that is for the year, you'll have money to keep the lights on. Right?
Well, you will for 1 year. If you just all of your free
I
cash.
did today and he did. Now, what do you got to lose?
Jimmy's going to personally guarantee it, so you're all set. So you
Jimmy
nothing
on
to
the
worry about.
communications team for the override.
Yeah.
You really,
I guess the real
signed up.
question is here, is when is the capital decision going to get some direction, i.e. a vote of the Board of Selectmen? We've been here, I've been here several times in the last year, requesting the funds for Winning Farm, requesting available funds, whichever one you want to call it, for free cash. I guess the real question is, when is this board, select board, going to make a decision and give us a direction? And we need that direction.
When we get a consensus.
Well, can
You know the answer as well as I
Can
do.
you pick a date, Lance? I'm trying to
No,
nail
no,
this
no,
down.
Well, we are going to,
You have to vote on the warrant articles eventually.
Hmm?
You have to vote on the warrant
vote on
articles
warrant
eventually.
articles
so,
is one
yeah.
piece, but the really critical piece is, sometime early January, we're gonna have to decide whether we wanna go for an override and the amounts that are gonna be in operating and in the
We're
stabilization
talking
side.
about this fall town meeting.
Yeah, we need to vote on
Yeah, what
this
are you gonna
issue
do?
in
Just
particular.
give us
So
direction of what the
But
board.
then we have meetings, right up until November 8th. And
So-
we'll make a decision before the warrant article.
Being
hits the
so
floor.
bold,
do you want to bond this
if
or what?
the
I'm fine with it.
planning
Okay.
board, if the capital committee has a plan in there, can we assume that it's gonna go to town meeting?
We'll just take a vote right now. So, I mean, we've got a warrant article as it stands that's, there. We've got another proposed one. I think the article is on the warrant now.
I
So,
appreciate you want to run this through very quickly. Mariano is not here, and I
Yep.
think for this thing, this is really critical, the town's financial health. And
I agree.
railroading this thing through.
nobody's railroading it.
I agree absolutely with Jimmy
Yep.
that this is a critical project and we need to do it. However, railroading it through and not being able to fund our operating budgets a year or so from now is of overriding importance. Okay? That's the end of them all. Our fiduciary responsibility of this town is to make sure we have school teachers and policemen and firemen and town services out there. I think this project is very important, and I'd be very happy to fund it this fall if I knew we were gonna have monies the following year or two for operating budget. The only reason I'm concerned about this is if for any reason that operating override fails, we're gonna scarf every bit of those monies back to keep the doors open and the lights going. And what am I gonna do to people say, I'm sorry, we spent it all on the Swanton Street culvert? That's not gonna be a good trade-off, Mike.
I think it's,
I think that's your opinion, Lance. and I
Yeah.
think
That's my opinion, but
I
our
think that's definitely your
fiduciary
opinion.
responsibility is the long-term health of this town. And if we can't keep the schools, we lay off teachers, and we have to lay off police and fire, cut back services, that's absolutely critical impact on the town.
What about the health and public safety of those 120-plus homes that are directly affected if we did have a flood?
That's another if. Again, if you
Just like-
can assure me that we're gonna get the override in March, we're all set.
If you can assure me we're never gonna need this project to prevent flooding,
We
I
don't,
won't ask.
we won't.
I mean, we can go around in circles. I mean, I just asked the board is,
I mean,
the capital committee is here, we've made a proposal, we believe it's a fair and honest proposal, we want to go forward in the fall, and we need your support, we want your support. And I'd just like to know when the board is going to take.
You have my personal support for this project to be funded. The only question is when we're gonna be able to afford that and do our.
I guess the question is, you know,
I
so
think
the board will be, you'll advise us of your
Well, I
decision.
think the discussion tonight has been good. We've got a couple other options floated out about how to fund this stuff. I think we need to chew on it a little bit and look for us. I mean, I don't think any of us are sitting here saying we shouldn't fund it. The issue
Mr.
is
Chair,
just
could
the
we,
timing
could we
and
hear
risk
from the
of it.
FinCom Chair? I don't want to put you on the spot, but just at this juncture, what your sort of comments or observations?
So Finance Committee has not been presented with this, nor have we taken a vote, so.
Sure.
What we have talked about as a Finance Committee, of course, is the rapid decline of free cash reserves and the implications of what that means. So I share Lance's concerns, and I agree, I think this is an important project, and it physically pains me that it gets more and more expensive every year. So if there's an option to figure it out, I understand the desire to do that sooner than later and try to keep the cost contained. And I think FinCom tends to fall in that direction. If we know there's a project that has to be done and costs continue to climb, you want to try to do that as soon as possible to minimize the net expense.
Yep.
So I think that's certainly the philosophy that we take. I would say that, and again, we haven't voted anything, but Finance Committee is extremely concerned about where we are in terms of free cash utilization and lack of funds available for FY20 and beyond if we don't see an override in the spring. So we're certainly proponents of presenting an override to the town. We don't know how much yet. We're working through trying to calculate that. But if that doesn't pass, then we are going to have to make significant changes to the services that we provide and to the expenses that we have. So I'm concerned about taking on this much of an expense in our current circumstance. To me, it seems irresponsible to make such a commitment for something that, while important, is not an emergency. And so in light of our current position, on a personal basis, I would say not yet.
does the additional 2 million in revenue, that we really hadn't anticipated, I mean, does that, impact I mean, all of this, beginning to start the equation for us, several months ago, we weren't anticipating that. So, I mean, does that
It certainly
impact?
helps, Mike, but we use 2.3 to balance the budget. So I look at
Right.
that, and we didn't fund OPEB as much as we usually do. So I look at that and say, geez, that just starts to get us back. We're still not even whole yet for FY19. We're still having to use free cash to balance the budget. So that's where it's great news, but
Yeah.
it doesn't solve our problem.
But we're still balancing the budget on the backs of people that are living in harm's way. I mean, that's my concern. It's a predominant safety issue for us, and we've seen it coming for a long time. And since we've been discussing this around this table, the price has doubled. So that's the math isn't working in our favor.
Yeah,
So, and I feel like at a certain point. We are at a point where we do have some additional revenue. We do have some money from Winning Farm that we had discussed applying to this project. And whether we apply that and we knock down the debt service on it, or we just bond the whole thing and we serve it, it's really the question that we had with McCall as well. We did that in two pieces, and we decided to take the money out of free cash so we wouldn't be servicing a larger amount of debt on that project for phase one. So I don't know. I think that now is the time to set aside, funding for it. And I feel like the longer we wait, Also, I think just institutional memory. I think, to Jimmy's point, a lot of people in this town have no idea that there was flooding here.
Right, I agree.
And so, 3 years from now, if some of us aren't sitting here, then there's, going to be other new projects that are the shiny new object, and people are still going to be vulnerable. So that's my concern.
If we go back to capital planning Wednesday night at our meeting and discuss the issues that came up here tonight, are we to assume there'll be no money from the Winning Farm for this project? Zero or any?
Well, that's just,
The options, yeah.
that's the manager's
Well, the
recommendation.
problem
I'm
is, when are we
saying,
gonna have to know how to go out and, right?
you could envision funding it any way you want, Helen, the
We can
cap,
just go forward with our plan.
right, you could,
That's it.
yeah, exactly.
So I was in the camp of using more, not less, than the Winning Farm, so maybe it's the three pots of money, whether it's the Winning Farm, the DOR, and bonding of a lesser amount.
And we might not have to figure it all out,
Yeah.
we could,
But that's where my thought is to move it forward sooner rather than later, and to use more and not less of the Winning Farm.
And we're not voting and bonding tomorrow, or we're just trying to get this before town meeting. If town meeting says, hey, Sam and Finance Committee seems pretty smart, what are you guys doing? We're going to vote against this. Well, that's what happens. But I think that because we teed up some of the money for engineering and planning last spring, and town meeting said yes, they expect us to bring this to them because they know how important it is, because that's what we told them.
That's right.
Right.
Why would we do planning without having a way to fund the project? I'm going to make a suggestion that we'll be able to come back in 2 weeks to present our full report to you.
Yeah, certainly. Be welcome.
And so maybe at that point we'll have a better sense of where we are.
Yeah, I think we ought to let this discussion percolate and see if we can have some.
Because next week is a holiday, right? Monday's a holiday.
Correct.
Check with on the timing, Helen, check with the assistant town manager. You want to make sure that your motion is in order so that it gets
Exactly. No,
published in
we'll
time.
do that.
Right.
When's the deadline?
Because your motion has your funding sources. If you're breaking them out with some specificity as you.
When's the warrant deadline, by the way?
Well, the warrant is constructed now,
As far
where,
as printing.
yeah, I think we're going to the printer about 14th.
Okay.
So, good.
What was that date?
14th.
Back on the 15th.
Is that?
That's
But I mean, we're kind of getting the report put together.
Printing on the 14th, come in on the 15th.
We've got 3 or 4 options on the table. We want to keep
That's a
keep
joke.
find one that works.
Did we actually get the check from Winning Farm?
We did.
Yeah, do you want to see a copy?
Did it actually cash and funds are there?
We actually have it in a briefcase in Richard's car, so it's.
As far as we know, it did not bounce out the door.
That's great news.
This should be in somebody's frame. Thank you guys for all your hard work on
Thank
such
you.
an important, it's like great to see us here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jimmy, I'm getting you on the override committee. We're gonna need all the help we can get.
Now we move on to the next topic on which no one has
Thank you.
good opinion. Housing production plan. Pick up from the discussions last time. There have been, I guess, I did read the detailed regulations guidelines that DHCP put out on the whole thing. Mariano passed me over the weekend some more information on what they actually consider the piece. I have not had time to do much with it. Jackie and I are planning to sit down perhaps tomorrow afternoon
Yeah.
and chew on the whole thing a little bit. So I'm
Yeah,
not sure
I mean,
we're
it's
gonna report
so
tonight.
much great work and so much effort, and so all I was thinking about is just changing some of the verbs to like consider, things like that. But I think there is some discussion separately about the, in addition to what Lance just said, the whole topic of accessory dwelling units. So, and whether or not, there's certainly like a lot of zoning tools in addition to the ones that are included, and whether or not whether or not something like with that tool, whether or not it should be included in the report, or whether or not it needs to be based on the criteria that's suggested to be in the HPPs, because there could be even other things. It could be that we could put it in like a footnote with other things, or kind of what the thinking is there. But in general, it seems like the 40B discussion and all the other discussion is so intermingled that I guess we're going to think about it as kind of expanding the executive summary or something along those lines.
And that's where I'm at, great work and, on the plan, but I've got some major concerns about the accessory dwelling units. I would really like to not see it in there. I think it produces density. It has the propensity to really change the character of Winchester, impacts on schools and traffic. It's a density producer, so I'd like to reach out to others and give them, I don't know if people really have looked at it that close, the general public, other boards, planning board, school committee, to really understand the potential implications of, it's a major factor to have that make its way into the town from a character perspective, density, and budget, school system, traffic, and all of that. So I'm very much opposed to having that component within the HPP.
And the other topics have been discussed a lot. I think that people would have an understanding of them. So, whereas that one, it just seems like it's kind of like a pretty early, it's in a different kind of track with even people's understanding of it.
So what we had discussed, one optimistic forecast, is we could have a slightly modified version of the plan together to beg people to read by Thursday, by the 9th meeting.
Yeah.
What we've been discussing is perhaps expanding their executive summary to get a little more explanatory. I mean, it's pretty clear from the materials that we reviewed that you need a plan in place, and we need, by our numbers, to produce about 40 units a year to get safe harbor. We produce more, you can get 2 years of safe harbor instead of 1. And then there's a set of strategies that I think address the affordable housing one, and we pull those out and say these are the ones that are critical to the affordable units, and then these are additional ones that can generate moderate housing as well, and make that structure a little clearer, and then we can debate on the 9th whether we want to include the, one or more of the specific strategies, because we can always put them back in later. I gather it's not, it's pretty clear you're not committing.
Right. I mean, these are options. They're not necessarily recommendations even. So it's a big inventory of all of the, potential options for the community, and we make the decision about what moves forward.
So our initial read over the weekend is that it's hard to make out from the full report where you're going with the whole thing, and that an expanded executive summary that's a little clearer to lay out those things might be a solution to making it clearer what we're doing. And we can say we want to keep these strategies in for an hour, we want to.
I think there may be strategies that we, with an approved plan, that we just don't use for certain, it may not be the best bang for your buck for us. So
I think what Jackie's doing is going through and saying,
Consider. Yeah, the only concern, Mike, I don't disagree with you in theory, but it's just that there's probably literally over 100 other ones that could be in there. One could be like 7-story, housing in town center or something. I mean, there's literally almost an infinite number. And so obviously there's already been an effort to decide which ones to go in there. And I totally understand a lot of them. It's just that one, I just know from having been on the planning board for 4 years, we've talked about a lot of the other ones, but on the accessory dwelling units, there has to be a lot of discussion among so many different groups in town. So it just seems like it's so early. The other thing that's interesting is when it gets to this one category about specific strategies, it's like the first one, which is really interesting. It almost seems like maybe that's the case.
It's probably alphabetical, but I think that, if we're looking at the accessory dwelling unit in particular, I mean, that would take a zoning change, so that wouldn't be an easy task for.
Well, a lot of the other ones are zoning changes too. In fact, one of the separate
Right.
categories is to change the zoning,
Right.
in general.
But
So
that's a big, that's a big project. That's not just, so when we vote on this, these are options that we're supporting, but not necessarily individually. So we're not saying that if we approved this housing production plan that we're going to immediately approve accessory dwelling units. It means that it's an option that we could pursue at town meeting for a zoning change. That's all it's saying.
Right,
It's an option.
yeah, I understand what you just said, I totally do,
My
but
concern
but
is
there's
that
other.
it gets into the HPP, and, we had the folks in here from the master plan who initially had said that to respect existing plans, then it goes to town meeting, and the advocates would say, well, it's in the HPP, it's in the master plan, how can we go against it?
If we in the planning board can't agree on that particular one, we could strike it or move it to a less desirable category.
Or just say
We can
consider or
sort
something.
these strategies into
Or make it a little more,
short-term.
or like to study, or there's so many ways to
No,
sort of like.
I appreciate
yeah,
that. I
that's
mean, I
all.
think that's fine. I just, I just don't want to, take,
I don't think that
all
would
of the
delay
strength
anything.
out of,
Yeah.
some of the motivation behind, every single one of those recommendations.
Yeah, no, I don't think
If-
that's
If
it,
the
yeah.
ADU is where we're hung up and we want to say consider rather than,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And I presume we could sort these on both sides of the affordable and moderate housing. And they're kind of more attractive, more immediately feasible, and less attractive, or not less attractive, but less immediate.
More
Yeah,
complicated.
well, I think that's what
Or needs
that
more
grid
study.
is in there.
I'm just thinking listing them that way rather than grid. The grid has the information in it.
Yep.
This is,
At the back.
Well,
package it in the-
yeah.
package it in the front, and the way to understand it.
Yeah, if we need to sell it better, that's fine.
Okay, so we're gonna take a lot of coffee and take a stab at it and bring it back. And we'll try to get
Tomorrow,
coffee
yeah.
back to people before the weekend.
Okay.
So, okay.
But a lot of hard work, and so you're to be congratulated, and if Mariano was here, I would say the same thing, just for all the hard work that was done on it.
Okay. In front of you on the table is an updated version of
Latest
the,
version.
Poor Jim. We leave you guys with the.
he should know better. An updated version of the warrant. Let me flag for you the changes.
Should we have these fine gentlemen in here before we talk about paper?
Well, this is what we're.
Okay, oh, you're segueing
That-
into theirs, okay.
So the ones we've
It's an
changed
introduction
are-
for you.
The ones we've changed are, we've filled in some numbers on the public, on the licensing stuff, and we've now filled in all the planning board articles. I don't really need to discuss those today. Most of the rest of them have been cleaned up reasonably, and I've reviewed, Nina has gone over them all, I think, with things. There's still a few in there on the pilot programs. We have to see what comes out of that solar piece. But then, and I think we've cleaned up all the 22 Highland ones, repackaged those, so they're reasonably accurate. The one we left off last time, Mr. Whitehead would like to talk to us about the traffic article. This is Article 27 now.
Thank you for coming at 7:30 and almost staying for 3 hours.
It's always enlightening to hear the discussion and debate.
How enlightening.
Excuse me, I believe when we left off the last time, there were questions about whether the request was a continuing request, or whether, and also there was some questions from Dave regarding the amount, his concern about the amount. So in looking at considering everything that's, uncertainty of the override and so on and so forth, I think what I'd like to propose to you tonight is that we go with a one-time request. That would give us $55,000. That would give us enough to do the two critical studies that we have on the plate. And I think some of that information would be useful in feeding into calculation of an override amount if we come up with some serious dollars. And that, I think, would address Mike's concern that we be able to fund whatever we come up with in the end. So anyway, that would be my request, that we include in that article. It's a one-time request, and we'll see how it plays out. And once we've got the, to get an override, then we could go talk about more ongoing funding when we get a better feel for what's going on. But as you can see from Beth's work, there's a number of areas in town that we have to do some studies get some recommendations and come up with designs. And so, to have that, probably focus more on the studies than on the design at this point, just so we get the options and we kind of get a rough idea of how much money, and then we can go into design, in the spring or whenever we know whether there's money there.
Sounds good.
So that
What were
would
the
be-
2 projects, Jim? The 55?
Well, Highland Avenue, the Highland Avenue corridor is probably the largest dollar amount. That's about 30 grand. And then
And what is done for that now?
what has been done for
No,
that?
what would be done with the,
Well, there are numerous concerns. The Park Avenue and Highland intersection is a concern, and looking to perhaps need a turning lane or also perhaps a turning lane at the Mount Vernon and Highland intersection. There's a number of pedestrian crossing concerns about kids going to school, possibly narrowing the crossing at a couple places because it's such a speedway. Looking at how to perhaps slow down some of the speeds on that road. Those are going to take some traffic counts and speed counts, and get recommendations from a consultant. Then the other major road that we want to look at is already there's some work being done on the Ridge and Lockwood intersection. But that whole area up in there requires a fair amount of attention, just because of all the traffic now that's being generated by the lights and the cut-throughs and everything that's happening up there. So those are the 2 areas that we would study as priorities. And then we have a much longer list of other priorities.
The Greek streets, the Socrates one too.
Well, there's already a study going on the Greek
Okay,
streets, on
already.
the philosopher streets, and that should be coming in within a
Oh, that
couple
was out of
months.
Beth's budget.
That's out of Beth's budget.
Okay.
Yeah, that's already been funded, so
And that was specific to the stop signs.
that was specific
Yep.
to the stop signs, and, and that also gets into pedestrian concerns there, so there may be some.
No sidewalks again.
No sidewalks.
Right, another area.
Kids biking in the streets,
We don't own these roads.
you know.
No, we don't.
We don't own the roads either, so that's another issue that we'll have to address down the road. But I think probably stop signs is going to be at least the initial recommendation. We heard tonight where Beth is talking, we've got several requests for do not enter during certain hours and so forth. In our discussion at our last meeting, one of the, I think we kind of got around to the consensus that the more we do that, the more we just push traffic somewhere else, and maybe keep the traffic on the arteries, and it just, makes it even worse. It slows it down even more. So, again, that's something that we'd like to get some input from a consultant on, to help us make a judgment, because frankly, we're seeing.
Sort of like criteria to evaluate when a request comes in, kind of thing.
Right, exactly. We maybe, one of the things we're considering is perhaps a couple-year moratorium on these do not enter during certain hours signs, so that,
Yeah.
you basically let the traffic kind of sort itself out, and then we find out, then we see where the real problems are. And, but you can just look at a GIS, the GIS maps of the town, and you can figure out where the cut-throughs are going. Yeah, pretty obvious.
where does the money go into engineering budget, or where's the money going?
Sit in a special fund.
Sit in a special fund that we would have to go to the town manager and justify the study. And
Don't point to him.
Well, to the town manager,
Basically be implemented through the town.
it would be implemented through the town
Which
manager,
is usual.
which is usual approach.
Basically, we've exhausted Beth's budget.
Right, and as you've seen, she's got a lot of stormwater work to come. Whether that, some of that will get funded out of her budget, and she's got enough other issues to deal with. So,
So we don't have to make a decision tonight on this, but that resolve the question on that
I mean, is that?
Sure.
Yeah, it's much
How
more
How
palatable,
much and
sure.
how long, so,
Okay.
short, limited piece for one shot.
I don't know, I mean, do you want it? What do you guys think?
Oh, you mean, are we favorable? Is that your question?
Yeah, I mean, just
Yeah,
bring it up.
definitely.
I'm inclined, but I'm also wanting to let Mariano chime in if we can wait a week.
Well, where are you at?
Yeah, I mean, I think we should wait probably then, if there's no urgency to do it. I mean, it's,
Just wondering, Paul's.
yeah, my only question is still, if there's a way to kind of tie the funding, to the excise tax here, whereas, clearly if there are, like this year, there's an increase in the excise tax that's unanticipated. You see more people buying more cars, and that's more traffic and more people in town. So it's a direct correlation between, the revenue coming in for, people driving. And so,
Yeah, I would think if this wasn't like an ongoing thing.
Ongoing thing.
Right.
But it
Yeah.
does
that's what I
mean
mean. So
a
it's one time doesn't
a
really get us
one-timer.
there,
Maybe, would you guys be willing to entertain another half sentence in there that says, and look for options for ongoing funding?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's,
That might be, take $10,000 out of this, and I don't know whether, or just, that'd be part of the mandate for this one, is you take some time to look at what we could, probably some legal time to figure out what we could.
yeah, I don't think that's much.
Easily chew it off and,
Oh, I believe it.
yeah.
I mean, again, I'm much more inclined to support it being a one-time with some real projects and concerns to address it, so that's more inclined to support it under those parameters.
And certainly, I have no problem with saying we'd come back with looking at, ongoing funding sources.
Yeah, that
You
would
know,
be useful too, because
I think
that
it's-
gets at the question
And
of
lots going to depend
how much
on,
money do we take out of excise, what do we need to do, do we need town meeting approval, I don't know, would be good.
I mean, everything,
Yeah.
those dollars go into the
General
cash
fund.
fund,
Yeah,
so.
even parking meter fund, things that are connected to the traffic that's being created,
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can look at that. I know that some of the parking money goes to pay for the parking officer, so.
Yes,
Some of it
definitely.
does, yeah.
Okay, so I guess my sense of the board tonight is that we're in favor of it, but we'll have to do a formal vote when Mariano has.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll tweak the words and, okay, good.
Thank you for all your hard work on that. Thank you.
See you later, Bob.
So let's cover the couple other short questions we have.
Thanks, Jim. It's nice seeing you.
So, under Article 4, which is on page 2, this was the sale of, under the grant, general on-premises licenses for sale of beverages without food. So the question was, this would be to, for example, be able to grant a license to Right Lock Farm or the Griffin or other not-for-profit organizations, so that the ones who, give us dozens of applications, one-day permits each year. So the question was, we did two things. We said, we asked Jen how many people apply for more than a handful a year. She said typically no more than a couple, 3 organizations do that are not-profit. So I put in, we should grant no more than 6, and the board can change that if they want to move it up or down. And then we had talked about the question of, can we make those licenses applicable only to not-for-profit organizations? And so that language is in there. So I don't really want to.
You're on 5?
4.
On 4,
Four.
Section 1.
Okay.
So the question was, how many of these licenses do we grant, and do we limit them to not-for-profit?
Yeah, I think, has town council reviewed this?
Yes.
Okay, because there are different kinds of nonprofit organizations.
Okay, if you want to.
Like there's recreation as opposed to like cultural kind of thing, so, and I think what you're probably, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but sort of envisioning is sort of like the Griffin or the farm or historic.
What's I always get confused. I mean, would non-profit go in there too as well I never fully get the.
Yeah, it is
Non-profit,
nonprofit.
Not-for-profit, I think not-for-profit is a type, and non-profit is what happens in a bad year.
No, there's
I'll ask- I'll
there's
ask
a legal
Mina.
difference.
So we'll have, I'll ask
Yeah.
Mina tomorrow, whether that better needs definition, Jackie.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing we did then on Article 5, then, we had the discussion of parks and playgrounds. So Mina suggested under 5, in the middle of the page, under section 21, under 2, he said the select board, he suggested this wording, select board in its capacity as local licensing authority may authorize the consumption and possession of alcoholic beverage in or upon any street, sidewalk, or park to the extent permitted by state law. So we've eliminated playgrounds. He said we should state definitively where we want to, where it's permitted, and then, of course, she said by the state law it would be covered. We're really talking one-day permits here, so that change.
Right, with the local, yep, that's clear, I think.
And then I haven't had a chance to look at all the planning things, but I believe that the Article 15 on the Glenwood is the same, Article 116, those are all pretty much the same.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it was on this one, section 21, that the part about the police authority to basically confiscate the alcohol was taken out. So I'd want to know what town council thinks of that too, because it might have just been inadvertent.
Okay, you can ask me tomorrow morning.
Yeah. Are you seeing him, or you're talking to him, or?
On, that's, I'm sorry, not
Wednesday
tomorrow, but Wednesday morning. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think it was that one, section 21. I can look it up, but.
All right, I think the other things are just generally cleanups. I think all of the 22 Highland ones are blocked together. Although I still would, I should suggest, well, Article 17 on the demolition is now ahead of land swaps. We want to move it to the, after the land swaps.
Yeah.
Okay.
So reorder that one.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that makes sense.
I don't think there were any other.
Is the article in here about, there was something about, I think, insurance or something? Is that when, I think there was some question whether or not,
58? Yeah, I think we took that.
took it out? Okay, not necessary.
So on the
Ballot.
ballot.
Okay, oh, ballot.
So you're off.
Wow,
You don't have to
okay.
argue with it.
I'm happy to do any of these other ones, though.
Okay.
Keep that in mind.
And once we update the numbers on Wednesday, we'll put out a task sheet.
Okay,
Who's the lucky coordinator.
great.
But I think those are the major changes.
Sound relatively uncontroversial, this town meeting. Should I actually say that?
You
Yeah.
just jinxed
I
us.
just jinxed us,
Yeah.
okay.
We're done.
We done?
So, Mr. Rico, would you like to move that we,
That's
oh,
why you're
I'm sorry,
gonna
the consent.
do the,
agenda.
consent. Can you do it without me?
Mike,
Is
you
it-
wanna do that, or do you wanna-
Yep. So,
So just to make note,
I know.
okay,
that it's, all of the licenses are on the agenda, but also on the, at table,
at table, not,
right there.
okay. All of them are on the at table,
There's 2 licenses, but also just to make note that number 1 at the at table is to make a motion that they can use the Winchester room as the early voting
okay.
site.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we allow the Winchester Town Hall to be designated as the official polling location for early voting, specifically the Winchester Room, per the town clerk's memo and request.
Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Any question? Otherwise, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Um,
301.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve one-day alcohol and beverage licenses for the following: Brett Henry for Mountain Vernon Cafe, October 14th, 2018, for the Right Lock Farm; Bone Up Brewing Company, October 19th, 2018, at Right Lock Farm; Amy Rinskoff for Right Lock Farm Conservancy, October 5th, 11th, 12th, 13th, and 21, 2018, at Right Lock Farm; Annette Lanigan for Jumelage, October 26th, 2018, at the Sanborn House; Gail Freeman Ackerbloom for Studio on the Common, October 11th, 2018, and Iritza Benjavar for Griffin Museum, October 11th and 25th, 2018.
Do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay, any further questions? If not, all in favor, please say
Aye.
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 Opposed, nays, ayes have it. Okay.
Accept some donations.
Oh, did I miss something? Oh, see, okay.
On the other.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the very generous donations, the amount of $3,360 for the Council on Aging to be deposited in the Council on Aging gift account.
With appreciation. Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
What? Okay.
Everyone there, so if there are no further business, we're going to try to meet at either 5:36 on Tuesday evening.
Actually, I'll sit over
Deal with the issues, and then we'll meet with the planning board at presume at 7. So, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Six.
Second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Right.
Aye.